Michael in Bangor, Maine. Hey, Michael, what's on your mind?
Tom, thanks for not saying banger.
You're welcome.
Long-time listener to your show. I am sort of your classic 18th century liberal. I know there's a lot of confusion these days between 21st century liberals and 18. But anyway, I was listening intently to your conversation with the professor about fascism. And one of the things that sort of disturbs me, and I listen to Progress a lot, is that there's a conflation between people who are white in the United States as being fascist, but then there is no conflation between socialism being just as totalitarian, at least in terms of what's happened in historical times. And I just wish I could see a little bit more discussion instead of sort of mirroring or just focusing on whites and racism, which is obviously a problem. I'm not demeaning it or at all or playing it down.
Diminishing it, yeah.
But there are other types of isms that are happening on the left, in the center.
Michael, let me be very clear about something. The government of the Soviet Union, as reinvented by Lenin and then Stalin, they called themselves socialist. They called themselves communist. I frankly don't think they were either one. I don't think Marx would have recognized it. It was a right-wing totalitarian government. It used violence and the threat of violence against its own people in order to keep people in line. That and you can, and to a substantial extent, that has also been true in a number of other countries that are, quote, socialist. You could make that same charge against Castro in Cuba, particularly in the early days, and you can make that same charge, and I think Cuba is actually, transforming itself into more of a democratic socialist country, but, that's a whole other conversation, and Hugo Chavez and Maduro in Venezuela. Nobody, literally nobody, not one single Democratic politician in the United States, even so-called far-left Bernie Sanders, who's not as far-left as Franklin Roosevelt, who proposed that housing and a job should be considered a right in the United States, just like education and health care. He wanted all four of those things to be considered rights that would be provided by the government, lacking, the ability of capitalism to provide those things. Even Bernie doesn't go that far. There is not a single Democratic politician in America who is advocating the kind of socialism and communism that we saw back then. Democratic socialism is what you have in Canada. Democratic socialism is what you have in all of the European countries. That's what they call it there. And that is where you have a strong social safety net, where the government provides health care at the very least and education, essentially for free. Obviously, nothing's for free. We all pay for it with our taxes, but provides it at a lower cost than the so-called free market would, than capitalism would, because there's nobody skimming money off the top, and also encourages competition and capitalism. And that is what the Democrats are proposing. So it seems to me, Michael, that you're bringing up something that's a complete straw man argument.
No, I'm not trying to bring up a straw man argument, because the problem is it's not all. I disagree with you, by the way.
Name one Democrat who has ever said that they want the United States to be like the Soviet Union.
Well, why would they say that? That would be self-defeating.
They would say that if they believed that. You're asserting that there are Democrats who want the United States to be like the Soviet Union or Cuba. I'm saying name one.
Okay, Jill Stein.
Jill Stein is not a Democrat. She's the head of the Green Party.
But that's not my point. My point is that there are people who are...
And she's not elected. She's never been elected to anything.
I understand, but there are people on the left who are...
And I don't think Jill Stein is calling for America to be like the Soviet Union. I
heard her saying that.
Well, I'm not here to defend Jill Stein, but I'm saying, Michael, that I realize that the message that you're getting on right-wing hate radio and on Fox News, and out of Trump's mouth, that the message you're getting is that Democrats want to embrace a Soviet-style state. And you're getting that from the Koch brothers, from Freedom Works around, health care. And in fact, that was the message that they were...
I don't listen to them.
When they were pumping the Tea Party back in the day and paying, having these $300,000 buses, take, poor, confused, boomers around to say, get your government hands off my damn Medicare. They were basically saying this is Soviet-style socialism. And it's a lie. It's just a simple lie. There are no Democrats who are proposing anything even remotely close to Soviet-style socialism. In their most radical proposals, they're proposing things that Canada already has, which is, education that you can easily pay for, and health care that's covered, where we're all in a giant pool with health care, so it can be provided at a low cost and high quality.
You can do that with capitalism too if you have faith in the system.
No, you can't. And I would point out, the crimes of big pharma, the crimes of the insurance industry, the fact that you've got one insurance company, United Healthcare, that has the last two CEOs both took over $1 billion out of that company, and every penny of that was United Healthcare saying to somebody, and it could have been you, Michael, no, you can't have that new expensive drug to cure your hep C, or no, you can't have that operation because, we don't want to pay for it, or because you had a pre-existing condition, or because you didn't fill out your forms right. You and I both know that capitalism, when it's applied to things that are the public good, tends to basically extract money from the public, which is what capitalism does. I mean, that's its job, and it's fine. If it's making blue jeans or computers, I'm all in favor of that, right? But if it has to do with the public good, things like health care, things like education, over and over and over again, when you turn those things over to capitalist systems, what you end up with is people being ripped off.
Well, this is the kind of discussion that I would like to see more people having. I disagree with you. I think that the redistribution of wealth, which is what is at the basis of everything that the Democrats are arguing, whether you want to call it socialism or not, when you have the markets regulated without any notion of free market, that you're going to redistribute, who is making the decisions to redistribute?
Michael, there's no such thing as a free market, number one. And number two, you're talking about redistributing income.
Well, there's no such thing as a pure free market, but there is as much a free market as you can try to make without having the excesses that you are talking
since
about.
Reaganism, since we changed from... Well, hang on just a second here. You've raised two things now. Since we changed from FDR-ism to Reaganism, from an economic policy promoted by John Maynard Keynes to an economic policy promoted by Milton Friedman, what we have seen since Reagan became president is the transfer of something on the order of $6 or $7 trillion of wealth out of the pockets of the middle class and into the pockets of the top 1%. That is absolutely undisputable. So if you want to talk about transfer of wealth, it's going the wrong way from my point of view. I forget what the other point I was going to make.
That the reason for that is not capitalism as much as what we have.
No, the reason for that is that capitalists have rigged the tax structure by buying politicians.
Well, that's always going to happen, whether you're in the communism or...
No, this is my second point, Michael. You would not want to go to a football game that did not have referees enforcing the rules. It would not be interesting. It would not be fair. And in capitalism, we have to have, capitalism only functions well when there is competition. And when Reagan started deregulating capitalism in the United States, what he basically did away with is competition. You've got 4 or 5 companies who own the airline industry, who own the internet service provider industry, who own the television industry, who own the radio industry, who own the agriculture industry. I mean, name an industry of transportation, name an industry that's not dominated by at the most 5 companies. That is anti-competitive. It's making it almost impossible for small and medium-sized businesses to grow and prosper. And when they do, the business plan now is get to the point where you can be bought out quickly before one of these big companies squashes you like a bug. That is anti-competitive. This whole deregulation thing is destroying capitalism.
Now, wait a second. There's a difference between easing regulatory stuff and enforcing the antitrust laws, which is something we don't do.
The antitrust laws are regulation.
I didn't say that some regulation isn't good.
Well, in 1982, Reagan officially stopped enforcing the antitrust laws, and he called that deregulation. And what did we get out of that? We got the M&A, the mergers and acquisition mania that happened throughout the Reagan administration. Right now, there are 50% fewer public companies in the United States, 50% fewer publicly traded companies than there were in 1980. Why is that? Because of consolidation, because of Reagan's deregulation. And that's not good for capitalism, Michael.
The bottom line is I agree with you about putting together as much competition, free market as we can, regulated by good common sense. I support.
No, it's regulated by government.
I support.
You can't have capitalism without government creating the framework, just like you can't have a football game without the NFL saying, here's the rules.
Well, I understand, but there are Democrats too. Tom, the problem isn't that you're not identifying problems. The problem, from my point of view, is that it's always the right that's the problem. It's not the corporatist like Hillary Clinton. If you went after her like you went after the people on the right, we might have some semblance of commonality.
There are corporatists, Michael, I'll give you. There are corporatists in both parties. But your party, the Republican Party, is entirely corporatist. And the Democratic Party is only about half corporatist.
That's all right.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
4-hour Thom Hartmann Book Club excerpt today. We're reading from Ed Morales' new book, Fantasy Island, Colonialism, Exploitation, and the Betrayal of Puerto Rico. This is from the first chapter. There was never any doubt that the United States wanted Puerto Rico for its own when it began a war with Spain near the turn of the 20th century. Cuba had been in the throes of independence war with Spain off and on since 1868, and the conflict that began in 1895 seemed ripe for the United States to capitalize on. The sinking of the USS Maine, an American naval ship destroyed by an explosion while moored just outside Havana, fueled American entry into the war. Although there are conflicting theories about the source of the explosion, including the likelihood it was caused by a spontaneous internal fire, William Randolph Hearst's newspaper chain blew up the incident into the perfect catalyst for the United States to enter the conflict. When Theodore Roosevelt entered the fray with his army of Rough Riders, the whole affair came as no surprise to anyone who'd been paying attention to the lust U.S. government leaders and military had long expressed to expand southward and westward. And although the idea of manifest destiny was at the forefront of the political discourse of this period, it's less often observed that the United States' expansionist gaze was saturated with racial language and attitudes, at once desirous of and repelled by Latin America's mestizo mulatto social dynamic. The Haitian Revolution at the end of the 19th century and into the 20th created a U.S. obsession with both Cuba and Puerto Rico because of the potential of a similar black-led revolt on those islands. In 1826, Virginia Senator John Randolph feared that such a revolt would render the southern United States vulnerable to invasion from Cubans in rowboats. For this reason, he objected to the United States participating in the 1826 Panama Congress because American diplomats would have to endure the horror of a U.S. diplomat taking his seat in the Congress, quote, beside the native African, their American descendants, the mixed breeds, the Indians, and the half-breeds, without any offense or scandal that's so motley a mixture, end quote. The logic driving this perspective underlined not only the importance of slavery to the emergence of capitalism in the 19th century, but also, as Matthew Karp points out, in this vast southern empire, the extent to which slave owners and their elected representatives disproportionately shaped U.S. foreign policy. Going back as far as the Haitian Revolution, fear of a successful slave rebellion in the newly formed United States strongly motivated Southern politicians. As Karp mentions, to that end, Presidents Madison and Monroe, quote, used overwhelming force to destroy black maroon settlements in southern Florida, end quote. Fear of slave rebellions also briefly united the interests of American slaveholders and Cuban elites who wanted independence from Spain, but in the late 19th century, after abolition, Roosevelt's forces fought in conjunction with Afro-Cuban armies against their common Spanish foe. The move to wrest Cuba and Puerto Rico from Spain came just as Spain had finally relented to end slavery as a concession to black rebel Cuban armies that had formed to push for independence. In a further move to placate continued unrest on the island, in November 1897, Spain signed automatic charters for Cuba and Puerto Rico, which gave limited home rule governments to both islands. Puerto Rico would gain full representation in the Cortes, the Spanish parliament, and could veto Spanish commercial treaties unfavorable to them while also retaining the rights to set tariffs on imports and exports. In this way, Puerto Ricans were granted a kind of citizenship that allowed self-government, grafted on what was left of their Spanish subjecthood. Yet on July 25, 1898, 8 days after the first meeting of the newly formed Puerto Rican Parliament, U.S. troops arrived in the southern port of Guanica and replaced the Spanish flag with the stars and stripes. This date would be remembered over 50 years later when the United States finally followed through on a project to allow Puerto Ricans to have limited autonomy and self-government. But at the time, it was both the end of Teddy Roosevelt's splendid little war and the beginning of the current quandary over what exactly Puerto Rico's new colonial master would do with the island. Although historians agree that there was no pre-existing plan for designating Puerto Rico's status, there was a general belief that Puerto Rico could be incorporated as a U.S. territory and probably would be. This led many to assume that it would follow a similar path to statehood as former territories like Florida and Louisiana. At the very least, it would, by acceding to military control, receive, quote, the advantages and blessings of enlightened civilization, end quote, as Puerto Rico's first military governor, Nelson A. Miles, declared 3 days after the landing of Guanica. Because Cuba was so militarized during its wars for independence, the United States decided to allow it national sovereignty, thinking it could still exert considerable control over the economy because of existing business interests and a ready-made set of Cuban consumers who were already buying Ford Model Ts. But although Puerto Rico had experienced anti-Spanish uprisings in the mid-19th century, in 1898 they did not have nearly the same level of armed mobilization present. So the United States held on to it, particularly because of its geographic location, which would provide the United States with a stronghold on the easternmost tip of the Caribbean. The book is Fantasy Island by Ed Morales.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
So is the Congressional Putin Caucus going to give ally Ukraine to a bloodthirsty dictator? Hey, good morning or afternoon or whatever it may be, wherever you are. Welcome to the program. That's where I want to start off today. Also, in the first hour of our program, Trump got shut down by the New York Appeals Court. I'll give you the latest on that. And a crazy alert. Fox News revealed a dastardly plot to use the eclipse to smuggle immigrants into America. Seriously, you can't make this stuff up. In the second hour of our program, Trump is hatching plans to put Biden in prison. Are you and I next? Also, with both millionaires and homelessness on the rise in the U.S., right-wing donors are bankrolling a nationally coordinated move to end experiments in basic income. Biden has also got a new plan to relieve student debt for 20 million people. And our fascist alert. GOPers are now saying that nursing home residents are too close to death to vote. Really? Seriously? Norman Ohler will be with us, our one guest for the day in the top of the third hour, about his new book, Tripped, Nazi Germany, the CIA, and the Dawn of the Psychedelic Age. This is fascinating stuff. And a geeky science in the third hour. Is there a scientific reason to get a massage? So a lot to talk about. The op-ed that I published this morning over at HartmannReport.com is titled, Will the Congressional Putin Caucus Give Ally Ukraine to a Bloodthirsty Dictator? And, you know, it's pretty straightforward stuff. Today, the House is back in session. And Mike Johnson is saying, yeah, well, actually, this is a verbatim quote. He was on Fox News on Sunday. He said, we've been talking to all the members, especially now over the district work period. When we return after this work period, we'll be moving a product, but it's going to, I think, have some important innovations. Right. One thing he has and people around him have discussed is the possibility of, instead of giving Ukraine money or giving Ukraine weaponry, we should loan them money, which they will then owe to us. Another is that we should send Ukraine seized Russian assets. Either of those things would, be a months-long process, which would be more months of delay. Keep in mind, the Republicans in the House have been delaying this for, what, this is April, right? January, February, it's been 16 months that they have been delaying aid to Ukraine now for almost a year and a half. And the result is that Ukraine is starting to lose against Russia. I mean, Russia is just bombing the crap out of Ukraine right now, and they don't have the means to defend themselves. So what's going to happen? Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the titular leader of the Putin Caucus in the House of Representatives, came right out and said, I'm going to tell you right now, funding Ukraine is probably one of the most egregious things that Mike Johnson can do. Putin is a former intelligence officer. He understands propaganda. And he's been engaged in what's at least a 2-decade propaganda war against the United States. And his efforts have been so blatant that the chairman of both the House Intelligence Committee and the House Foreign Affairs Committee are warning about what's going on. I mean, Michael McCaul, the Republican from Texas, was blunt, saying that Russian propaganda has infected a good chunk of my party's base. He went on to say, quote, there are some more nighttime entertainment shows, I think he's talking about on Fox News here, that seem to spin like, I see the Russian propaganda in some of it, and it's almost identical to what they're saying on Russian state television on our airwaves. He adds, these people that read various conspiracy theory outlets that are just not accurate, and they actually model Russian propaganda. And then the chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, Representative Michael R. Turner, these are both Republicans, by the way. McCaul is a Republican from Texas. Turner's a Republican from Ohio. Turner was equally specific when he was asked if he agrees with McCaul's statement that Russian propaganda has infected a good chunk of my party's base. And he said, quote, it is absolutely true. We are directly coming from Russian attempts to mask communications that are anti-Ukraine and pro-Russian messages, some of which we even hear being uttered on the House floor, end quote. Now, why are Republicans promoting pro-Putin propaganda? Because they know that this is one way to stay in the good graces of Donald Trump. I mean, Scott Perry was doing the same thing on Fox News with Stuart Varney yesterday or the day before, I believe. It just, saying, there's no way Ukraine can ever win against Russia. Why are we flushing good money after bad? I mean, my words, not his, but that was the essence of what he had to say. And Trump rewards this behavior. If you suck up to Putin, if you're a Republican and you suck up to Putin, you get an invitation to Mar-a-Lago. You get Trump, highlighting you and praising you. Just ask Marjorie Taylor Greene.
It's working out really well for her. But it's not just members of Congress. Elon Musk has promoted Russian propagandists on X and cut off access to Starlink when Ukraine was preparing an attack on the Russian fleet at Crimea. And just this past weekend, RFK Jr. also echoed Putin himself, saying, quote, Putin said, I don't want to go into Crimea. Let's negotiate a peace. All right. And the three things he wanted to keep NATO out of Ukraine. That was number one. He wanted to denazify the Ukrainian government. These are just lies. Putin has himself said he's attacking Ukraine. His attack on Ukraine has nothing to do with NATO. What it's all about is that he doesn't believe Ukraine is a country. He views Ukraine the same way that China views Taiwan, a breakaway, essentially republic, a breakaway, piece of land that should be ours, essentially. And, in fact, this is what Putin said in a 2022 speech that Bobby Kennedy was essentially just echoing. He said that I just seek to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, as well as bring to trial those who perpetrated numerous bloody crimes against civilians, including against citizens of the Russian Federation. I mean, Putin is just emphatic about this. And here's where it gets really weird with the Republicans. They used to say, and now Bobby Kennedy is, but they used to say that, there's all these Nazis in Ukraine. And then it became widely known that Zelensky was Jewish. So they changed their tact. Instead of attacking Nazis, now they're attacking Jews. This, the Jews are not, Christians, and they don't like Christianity and all that kind of stuff. This is what Marjorie Taylor Greene said on Steve Bannon's podcast just a couple days ago. This is about the 2-year-long attack on Ukraine by Russia. She said, let's talk about what this really is, Steve. This is a war against Christianity. The Ukrainian government is attacking Christians. The Ukrainian government is executing priests. Russia is not doing that. They're not attacking Christianity. As a matter of fact, they seem to be protecting it, end quote. You get this? There have been over 80 priests killed in Ukraine. I believe the number is 86. 100% of them were killed by Russian bombs or Russian soldiers. 100%. But have you noticed that, this is the essential message of Marjorie Taylor Greene. Hey, have you noticed that Zelensky is Jewish and bloodthirsty dictator Putin loves to claim he's a Christian? Even the new co-chairman of the Republican National Committee has gotten into the let's suck up to Putin and trash America and our allies shtick. Michael Whatley told Maria Bartiromo on Fox News Sunday that Ukraine, like China and Iran, is an enemy of the United States. He said, Joe Biden's feckless leadership has shown China, has shown Ukraine, has shown Iran that they can feel free to be much more aggressive on the world front, to the point that they will even try and meddle with our elections here. This is so wrong. We signed an agreement with Ukraine, Russia, and the United Kingdom in 1994, the Budapest Memorandum. We signed an agreement saying that all three of these countries, the U.S., Great Britain, and Russia, would respect the territorial boundaries of Ukraine in exchange for Ukraine giving the world's second largest stash of nuclear weapons back to Russia. We all signed this. And these Republicans, they just want to walk away from this deal that we made. Traitor and treason are not words that you throw around lightly. But I can't see any other words that could describe America's legislators who want to surrender an allied democracy to a bloodthirsty dictator in exchange for for props from Donald Trump and political help on social media from Russian trolls. And, do not discount this. The Republican members of Congress who are trash-talking Ukraine and trying to stop aid are getting hugely boosted on X and on other social media platforms by those very Russian trolls. So, none dare call it treason? I think not. Call your member of Congress, 202-224-3121, and tell them we need aid for Ukraine now.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's talk media for the sane among us. I'll be right back with more of the news of the day and your calls. Stay tuned. And welcome back, Pearson in Lamarck, Texas. Hey, Pearson, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Tom. I was talking to our friendly hippies call screener, and he thought it was hilarious that when I told him that a supermajority of nursing home residents that I have dealt with as an ombudsman for the state area agency on aging, I was assigned to up to a half a dozen nursing homes at a time. Mm-hmm. And except for one or two, the vast majority of nursing home residents, they vote Republican, including, say, my parents.
That's interesting. And Republicans are trying to say they're too old to vote.
Yeah. So they're going to shoot themselves in the foot. But now I'm afraid they monitor your program, and I've just reminded them, hey, wise up. So
I doubt that.
I'm ashamed of myself once again.
Yeah, no, I don't think that the people who are promoting this kind of stuff monitor my program. I think they live in their own little bubbles. They're hoping to get on Fox News. I mean, that's their goal. But
well, between you and me and 40 million other households, is that the reach of free speech right now?
I don't know specifically, but it's large.
Yeah, let's hope that all 40 million of them aren't Republicans.
Yeah.
Well, and actually they should be, maybe, because those are people we need to reach over the long term.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's true. I like it when Republicans watch or listen to my program.
And one last thing, item of shame. One more item of shame for myself. Both my parents, they voted for Donald Trump in 2016. Mm-hmm. And then karma came around and hit him, and like less than 4 months later, they both died in a nursing home. So there's that.
Ouch. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Pearson. Well, Pearson, thank you for the call. It's an interesting theory. Thank you very much. Dee in West Los Angeles. Hey, Dee, what's up?
I was calling because, you were talking about Trump and all. And I remember in the last election, I remembered in the election when Trump won, they had shot to a bar or some spot in Russia, and all the Russians were jumping up and down cheering, and I thought that was a little bit odd that Russians should be cheering Trump. But I feel that he's partnering with Putin, and I think that he is really trying to destroy America, and I think it's all for his ego.
I agree. I agree. And his own wealth, yeah.
Right, money. And I really do believe that right now things are not going well for Americans in the sense that we see so many people who can't afford housing. Mm. They can't afford rent. They're struggling. I never saw so many homeless people in my life. Yeah. Back in, say, the 80s and the 90s. It's just terrible. But I don't understand. I think we have too many anti-American criminals in Congress. I really do.
I'm with you.
They're not pro-American.
No, and they're all in one party, which is so weird.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, exactly. Republicans.
Yeah.
I don't know why they call themselves Republicans. They're not even like Americans. But there was a man I met years ago. I wanted to tell you about him. He was a white man, and he was a writer and everything. He was writing in Culver City, real cool guy. But I remember talking with him, and he said, white people are the only people who vote against themselves.
Oh, interesting.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The things that they need that would help them, the Democrats are the only ones supporting those things. He said they vote against themselves.
Yeah, it's the old what's the matter with Kansas thing. Dee, thank you very much. It's nice to hear from you. I appreciate the call. It's 20 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. There is a long history of right-wing, conservative, Republican-appointed Supreme Court justices becoming liberals, or at least becoming reasonable. Earl Warren is probably the best-known example. He was, a right-wing governor of California. He was a hard-ass Alameda County prosecutor, a district attorney, and when Eisenhower put him on the court, a year later he did the Brown versus Brown v. Board of Education case. He ended discrimination, racial discrimination in schools, or at least, tried to end it.
So why are Republican billionaires now sucking up to conservative members of the Supreme Court? In my opinion, it's not a quid pro quo. They're not trying to get specific votes on specific issues. They're trying to prevent them from doing what Earl Warren did, which is waking up and voting for the benefit of America rather than just their patrons. There's a whole piece about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. So, welcome back. Jack Smith has filed with the Supreme Court, and Trump got shut down by the New York Appeals Court. These things happened yesterday, I believe, after we got off the air. The Associate Justice Lisbeth Gonzalez is the judge on the New York Appeals Court who just, you know, they made the arguments in front of her yesterday, and within hours, maybe shorter, I don't have the exact timeline, she said, no, we're not going to change the venue, we're not going to delay the trial. And so now they're filing a petition objecting to the gag order imposed by Judge Merchan. That was not argued on Monday. That'll probably be something that comes up, later this week, today or tomorrow. At Monday's hearing before the appeals court, Trump attorney Emil Bove said, quote, in terms of pre-trial publicity in this county, this case stands alone. This is their new argument, Trump's new argument. There's been so much pre-trial publicity about this case that we can't get a fair trial. The problem, as Manhattan District Attorney Chief of Appeals Stephen Wu argued, is that he said, this is the defendant coming into this argument with unclean hands because the publicity in large part is his own. So, I mean, you just get this. Trump goes out and makes a big deal and talks to the newspapers and tweets and Truth Socials and all this kind of stuff about this case. And then he goes to the judge and says, there's been too much publicity. I can't get a fair trial. Right. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court is slow-walking Donald Trump's trial down in Florida. In Washington, D.C., his overturning the election trial. And arguably several of other of his trials, by appealing it to the U.S. Supreme Court. And then the U.S. Supreme Court, and this was in February, and the members who control the Supreme Court, the right-wing majority, said, okay, we're gonna give Trump as much time as humanly possible. So they scheduled the oral arguments for literally the last day this year, or in this court term, that they hear arguments, April 25th. And then they've got months to make their decision. Hell, they could take a year to make their decision. So, Trump's trials, many of Trump's trials anyway, the ones that have to do with things he did while president and immediately after leaving the White House, are basically all on hold pending the Supreme Court. Jack Smith's filing includes these bullet points. This is kind of from the table of contents. Number one, a former president lacks immunity from federal criminal prosecution for official acts during his presidency. A claim of absolute criminal immunity for a former president's official acts violates established separation of power principles. History supports the conclusion that former presidents are subject to prosecution for official acts. Federal criminal law applies to the president. The impeachment judgment clause does not make Senate conviction a prerequisite to criminal prosecution of a former president. Even if the former president has some immunity from federal criminal prosecutions for official acts, this prosecution should proceed. No form of official immunity should preclude trial on the indictment in this case. So step by step, it's like Trump is going to get nailed. Meanwhile, over at Fox News, they couldn't let the eclipse go by without figuring out a way to tie it to migrants, illegal immigrants. Oh, my God. This is Dana Perino. A rare celestial event collides with a policy failure on the ground. The southern border will be directly in the path of totality today when the moon covers the sun for nearly 4 minutes. And then Bill Hemmer says, we are told that officials are bracing for higher traffic than usual. And that means a real opportunity for smugglers and cartels and migrants to come right on in. And then correspondent Bill Millogan says, well, everybody's going to be looking up. If you're looking down at the border, here's what you'll see. Take a look at the video from nearby New Mexico, which is seeing a huge surge of illegal alien invaders. You'll see illegal immigrants dressed in dark clothing, sometimes camouflage, trying to sneak into the United States. That's right. The eclipse is actually a clandestine operation by liberals and the evil mastermind. This is News Corp writing this over on Daily Kos. And their evil mastermind, President Biden, financed by George Soros, aimed at smuggling terrorist migrants into America to vote for Biden and other Democrats. Who knew? Incredible.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Can you imagine the sessions that they have where they think this stuff up and they just laugh hysterically and probably drink a lot of beer? It's amazing. Pick calls right after this. Today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Fred Kaplan's new book, The Bomb: Presidents, Generals, and the Secret History of Nuclear War. This is from the introduction. For 30 years after the Cold War ended, almost no one thought, much less worried, about nuclear war. Now almost everyone is fearful. But the fear takes the form of a vaguely paralyzed anxiety. Because of the long reprieve from the bomb's shadow, few people know how to grasp its dimensions. They've forgotten, if they ever knew. The holiday from history began on August 8th, 2017, when President Donald Trump, barely 6 months in office, told reporters at his golf resort in Bedminster, New Jersey, that if the North Koreans kept threatening the United States with harsh rhetoric and missile tests, quote, they would be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen, end quote. Even those who didn't remember President Harry Truman's similar description 72 years earlier of the atomic bomb that destroyed Hiroshima, Truman said, a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth. It was clear that in language more bellicose than any president since the end of World War II, Trump was talking about launching nuclear weapons at North Korea. Not if its leader, Kim Jong-un, first attacked the United States, but merely if he developed the ability to do so. Then, 6 months later, Trump signed and released his administration's Nuclear Posture Review, a 74-page document that called for building new types of nuclear weapons and integrating them with the military's conventional war plans. In short, for treating nuclear weapons as normal. The red lights flashed. The alarm bells rang furiously. Yet here is what few recognized. None of these notions were new. The president himself seemed a departure from the norm. His character, erratic, eruptive, thin-skinned, willfully uninformed, a combustive mix for a world leader with his finger on the button. But the button and everything around it were the same. In those decades when most of us chose to forget the bomb, as global tensions calmed and fallout shelters crumbled and we turned our gaze to other problems and pleasures, the nuclear war machine continued to rumble forth in the beyond top secret chambers of the Pentagon, the Strategic Command Headquarters in Omaha, the weapons labs in various parts of the country, and the think tanks whose denizens never stopped thinking about the unthinkable. They all kept at their singular task, wrestling with the dilemmas posed by the bomb's existence. How to deter nuclear war? How to fight a nuclear war if it cannot be deterred? How to win it if such a thing is even possible? This is the nature of the nuclear era, and the era never drifted into suspension, even if our attention did. Trump snapped us out of our slumber, reminded those of us who were old enough to know, and informed those who weren't, that the bomb is still here. In public over the years, officers and officials have described America's nuclear policy as a second strike deterrence. If an enemy strikes us with nuclear weapons, we will retaliate in kind. This retaliatory power is what deters the enemy from attacking us. In reality, though, American policy has always been to strike first preemptively, or in response to a conventional invasion of Allied territory, or to a biological or large-scale cyber attack. In any case, not just as an answer to nuclear attack. All of these options envision firing nuclear weapons at military targets for military ends. They envision the bomb as a weapon of war writ large. This vision has been enshrined in the American military's doctrines, drills, and exercises from the onset of the nuclear era
through all its phases. Most presidents have been skeptical of this vision, morally, strategically, practically, but none of them have rejected it. Some have threatened to launch nuclear weapons first as a way of settling a crisis. The few who considered adopting a no first use policy, in the end, decided against it. There are rationales for these doctrines, drills, and exercises, and for the retention of the first use option. They are driven by policies, personalities, and bureaucratic rivalries, but also by a logic which, once its premises are accepted, hurls its adherents and the rest of us into a rabbit hole of increasingly bizarre scenarios that seem increasingly, if strangely, rational the deeper they're probed. Understanding the nuclear era, the era of our lifetime, means understanding the rabbit hole, who dug it, and how we got stuck inside. It means tracing the maze of its tunnels, which is to say the arc of its history. A story enmeshed in secrecy, some of it still secret, much of it now illuminated by declassified documents and interviews with key actors, though never fully told. How did we get to the second coming of nuclear panic? How did we wind up with thousands of nuclear weapons, far more than any war aims could justify? What propelled the nuclear arms race during the decades-long Cold War? And what happened to the weapons and their guardians after the Cold War ended? And how and why did any of this persist? Chapter 1, Killing a Nation. The book Fred Kaplan's The Bomb.
Did you know that every weekday we send out an email before the show giving you all the topics coming up so you can be fully informed and ready to interact with our program? Or that after the show we send out Sue's Stack, a list of every topic I've discussed along with clickable hot links to every source of information I've shared with you on the air? It's all completely free and available over at thom.tv, THOM.tv. Check it out. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here, 34 minutes past the hour. James in Chicago. Hey, James, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. This is my first time calling your show, but I really enjoy it. I'm a little bit nervous, so I'm going to try to just say what I need to say kind of slowly.
Okay.
My concern is when Donald Trump goes to trial on April the 15th, I truly don't know if there's going to be a trial, because Donald Trump, he has a way of throwing in a monkey wrench in all situations. So my question is that if he do go to trial and he tells the judge that I don't have any more lawyers, so the trial cannot continue. So what would the court do then?
That's a scenario that has been raised by Donald Trump court watchers. If Trump fires all his lawyers on the first day of the trial, for example, then they have to postpone the trial. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see that happen, James. It really wouldn't. But it's also, I don't know if the judge views that as purely a stalling technique. There may be some kind of sanction against Trump for doing it. That's a question to put to somebody who's really familiar with this kind of criminal law. I'm not. But you're onto something. You're absolutely onto something, and they have to be discussing it. I mean, he desperately does not want this trial to proceed, because this is one that can put him in jail, and Donald Trump does not want to go to jail. He doesn't mind paying a big fine, but jail? Nah, he's not made for it. So, James?
Okay, Tom, this is going to be my last word. I just need to say this, that I would not vote for Donald Trump if I was dead. Yeah. I wouldn't. Even if I was dead, I wouldn't vote for him. So you know how I feel about him while I'm alive. Yeah. So thank you so much for taking the call.
My pleasure. Good talking to you, James. I hope you call again in the future. From James to James. This James is in Portland, Oregon. Hey, James, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. I want to run this past you. I was reading in a CNN article on the web that Ukraine relies on drones pretty much because they don't have ammunition now. So,
Right,
but
and they're
the
making
problem
their own.
is, the problem is they rely on Starlink.
Yep,
Okay, Starlink is Elon Musk,
that's right.
and now their drones aren't working too good because Russians are infiltrating somehow, and they're only getting part signals.
Yeah, they're jamming.
And and so according to the article, the Democrats are trying to investigate it. But I don't. First off, do you trust Elon Musk? And why in the
When it
hell?
comes to Ukraine, no, I don't. So.
Yeah, okay. So I just wonder what's your take on this?
I don't know a lot. I haven't read the article, James, that you're talking about. I do know that Elon Musk actually, this was last year, maybe even the year before that, maybe earlier in the war, Ukraine was preparing to attack the Russian fleet in Crimea. And Elon Musk killed the Starlink connection to their effort, and so they couldn't do it. And Musk had apparently some days or weeks before that a telephone conversation with Vladimir Putin, and Putin had convinced him that if they attacked the Russian fleet, that it would start a nuclear war and end all life on Earth, and that's why Musk intervened, or at least that's what he said. I don't know. That's that requires a fairly high level of credulity that you would think that Musk would be a little more skeptical of things like that. And certainly time has proven that that's not the case. I mean, they went ahead and using other technology that didn't require Starlink, these torpedoes, have blown up a whole heck of a lot of Russian ships. So I don't think so.
Yeah. And Elon's kind of showing his colors, like he's passing all these BS misinformation.
Yeah. Well, and he welcomed all those Russian trolls and Nazis back onto his platform. I mean, it's kind of grim.
Yeah.
I would like to see what they should be doing is they should be boosting some progressive voices too if they want X to remain relevant. It's still the largest social media platform, short form social media platform in the world. I believe Facebook is larger, but it's long form. But we'll see. We'll see. Stay tuned, as they say. James, thanks for the call. Sandra in Omaha, Nebraska. Hey, Sandra, what's on your mind today?
Well, I can't seem to avoid hearing things about Trump. And the more I hear, the more I think that this all tracks back to when he was a little boy. And he very clearly understood that he was not really cared about because he was shipped off to a quasi-quote military school to be away from the family for a while, and then when he'd come home for the summer, his mother would leave and go to Scotland to stay away from him.
Yeah.
And I think between that and his older brother Fred being probably the anointed one until he decided to be a pilot, and that was not going to be accepted, he became almost banished for that. Fell into alcoholism and died at a very young age because of it.
That was Mary's father.
And I think Donald was given the option of being, you can be my anointed one, but you have to earn it. And I think he's had so much hate and so much venom built up in his life over the years, and against women because of his mother, against everybody because of his father, and that hatred has just roiled and roiled to a point that he now has the potential to get even, and he will do it against
Miles. I'm forgetting his last name, but the guy who wrote the anonymous thing in the Washington Post, and then wrote a book about Trump.
He was on Joe this morning.
Yeah, he was.
On Joe.
And one of the things he said was that it was really hard serving a president who refused to be photographed with the military and who referred to military people as suckers and losers. And I think his time in that military academy, or pseudo-military academy, it wasn't an official military academy. It was a prep school where everybody wore uniforms and they did drill and they did stuff like basic training. And he probably hated that. I mean, it's a lot of physical exercise. And that's probably why he hates the military and why he trash talks our men and women in uniform. It's pretty breathtaking. It really is. Sandra, thank you for the call. Good talking to you. Tom in Irvine, California. Hey, Tom, what's up?
Good morning, Tom. I am sick of hearing that Republicans are better at messaging than Democrats. The only thing Republicans are better at is lying.
It seems.
I mean, the message that Republican messaging is better than Democratic messaging is itself propaganda.
Yeah.
I mean, watch or listen to any speech on the House or the Senate floor when it's covered by C-SPAN, where the coverage is relatively equal, and Democrats have the far superior message.
Yeah, the problem is that it never breaks through into the media. The Republican messages are constantly parroted in the media. We hear every little thing that Marjorie Taylor Greene has to say. We know every move that Mike Johnson is making. We're totally tuned in to the Republicans. But you don't hear what, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren are doing for student debt or for homelessness or for food insecurity. We just don't hear any of it,
Right. I mean, Republicans are, quote, better storytellers, unquote, than Democrats. The only reason why is because they lie so shamelessly.
Well, that's a piece of it. I think the Republicans, because they don't want people to know what they're really up to, and therefore, arguably, they have no policy chops. I mean, we know that they actually do have policies, right? They want to ban abortion nationwide. They want to end Social Security and Medicare. They want to do away with food stamps. They want to make it illegal to join a union. We know that that's their agenda. But basically, from their point of view, that is not an agenda. That's no agenda, at least in terms of their public-facing comments. And so, as a result, over the last 40 years, since Reagan kind of reset the Republican Party in this neoliberal mold, over the last 40 years, they've had to figure out ways to hold press conferences and go on shows and do things and say things that don't sound that weird and that don't admit what their real agenda is. And so they've gotten really good at performance art, basically, guerrilla theater, political theater. And, James Comer, we're going to nail Joe Biden. He held so many press conferences about how corrupt Biden was and with literally no evidence. And then he gets, his two big witnesses in, and they both, one turns out to be a Russian intelligence agent and the other turns out to be a Chinese spy. And, peddling lies about Biden. But still, a large percentage of Americans think that the Congress has unearthed Biden corruption. I mean, it's just, they're so good at this because they've got nothing else, so.
Yep.
Okay, Tom, thanks for the call. Well, excellent point. Diane in Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hey, Diane, what's up? Diane.
Hello?
Hi, Diane, you're on the air.
Yes. Well, number one, I saw my first total eclipse of the sun. Number two, and it was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Can you do that in your lifetime? Just make the effort and go. It is otherworldly to see it.
Yeah, I've been through one. It is an extraordinary experience.
Yes. Secondly, the Crumleys are being sentenced today.
Yeah, we're still waiting for that.
Right. That may set precedents for future situations, guns.
It may cause a lot of parents to start taking guns away from their kids or locking them up in a way that their kids can't get to them, and that will be a really good outcome. And that's the main reason why I'm hoping that they throw the book at these people.
Exactly. If you're irresponsible with your guns and your kids do something with it, it makes you accountable.
Yeah, I mean, when it first happened, Diane, I was thinking, geez, I don't keep guns in my house, or at least I didn't when our kids were growing up. But I was thinking, that could have been me. Their kid did something, and now we're going to hold them to account for it. But then when the story came out, the gun was a gift, and they were promoting guns, and it all seems sick and twisted.
They had a troubled child, and they thought the solution was to get him a gun.
Right.
I mean, go figure.
Well, it's the same thing that happened with the Kip Kingle, here in Oregon, and also the original shooter. Was Sandy Hook, wasn't it? The kid.
Yes, he was a troubled child too, and he even killed his mom.
Exactly. So, and anyhow, Diane, I interrupted you. You were going to say.
That's okay. Ukraine is on my mind. I have called my politicians through the switchboard. Very easy, 202-224-3121. And then I called the president, 202-456-1111. And I'm telling him he promised he would stand behind Zelensky. He's a seasoned politician. I mean, he wasn't talking out of How do you vow your country to help out someone that you encouraged? The UK and America both encouraged Zelensky to stand up to Putin.
Yep.
I mean, they said they'd be behind him, and what do? Now they're in. I don't care what Biden says. There are ways to do things. They haven't gone through the oligarchs' assets. They haven't sanctioned them as far as they could. And there are things they could do, and I blame the Democrats too, because they are not. We should be Churchill on this, and we aren't. And everybody's letting Zelensky and Ukraine down, even the Democrats. They could do more.
Well, I haven't seen evidence of that, and I don't know what more they could do, Diane. I think that Biden has run out of options. He's got to wait for Congress to appropriate the money. I mean, it's in the Constitution. But, you know, I get your point about the Republicans. Diane, thank you for the call. 47 minutes past the hour. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
It's the place where smart people get their news. I'll be right back with your calls. And welcome back. Roya in Los Angeles. Hey, Roya, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. How are you?
Good. What's up?
Good. I just wanted to call and say, you know, have you noticed, like, CNN's been just, like, so, like, Trumpity Trump lately? I don't know. I just feel like they're just so lame. I can't even, like, watch anymore. It's like I'd rather just watch MSNBC. I feel like because, like, CNN's, like, is it because they have that new owner or whatever that's, like, a Trump person?
Yep. I believe so. You know, I pretty much stopped watching CNN maybe 6 months ago when that management leadership shakeup happened, and they brought in Trump to do an hour-long infomercial and.
Oh, you know. Yes.
So now the only time I watch CNN is on Sunday mornings to watch Fareed Zakaria. That's it.
I was gonna say I like Fareed and I like Anderson Cooper, and that's about it. Like I'm just like I can't even watch it anymore. But I was like. Is it just me, or is it just like it's like a 360? Like I don't.
I'm hearing that their numbers are down substantially, so I don't think it's just you.
Well, you stop watching them. I'm kind of like I'm not going to watch them or whatever. But there's probably a lot of us then like-minded.
I think so.
Know.
I think so, Roya. I think you nailed it. Roya, thank you for the call and the question.
Thank you.
Yep. CC in Northbrook, Illinois. Hey, CC, what's on your mind today?
Tom, treason. You mentioned the word treason.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for taking my call, by the way.
Sure.
But I just want to say I'm a veteran, as I mentioned to you before, and I understand some of the tools of war, and one of the tools of war is the communication lines.
Yep.
If you notice, wars get started, I was in the Air Force. First thing we do, send those jets off. Those are going to blow up some communication lines. And what I want to relate that to is our communication lines in the United States, as you just mentioned, CNN. They went down. I mean, all the other ones. So the solution to that, and by the way, I listen to Black Talk Radio. You talk about infiltrated. We got a Tokyo Rose that used to come on at 6 o'clock in the evening in Chicago in Black Talk. Really? I mean, she was straight up praising Trump. I mean, she opens up her show with a Trump soundbite, how he praises black people. She opens up her show like that and calls him her little Donnie. I mean, I don't know if she's still on, but she had a good run there. So that's what I'm saying. And then just the infiltration in our Congress, it's been infiltrated. You see treason out in the open, as you just mentioned, Marjorie Taylor Greene. And the president, his cabinet, and the solution for that, I think, is to do some type of personality assessments in everybody's department if you're on board of this treason. And another solution for the communication line is free speech TV. The politicians should be bombarding free speech TV. If the Republicans have Fox, we got free speech TV. There's, use what you have. We only have limited channels. And one more quick thing, Tom. You mentioned Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner last week.
Yeah.
And Cheney, by the way, is the black person.
Thank you.
And I want to say, I'm from Mississippi. I was born in 1965.
Mm-hmm.
I have a heartfelt compassion for those freedom fighters who came there to fight for me.
Yeah.
And I'm paying it back the best I can. So I thank you, Tom, for your part. I'm doing my part, and I hopefully everybody else is fighting too.
Yeah.
So thank you, Tom.
As Dennis Weaver used to say, if we all pull our wagons, we'll get this wagon train over the mountain. CC, thank you for the call. It's great to hear from you. It's 52 minutes past the hour. Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on Pacifica, or one of our many nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting progressive talk radio, and tag you're it. From Los Angeles to Columbia, South Carolina, from Birmingham, Alabama to Baltimore, universal basic income programs are chalking up proof after proof of their viability. Basically just giving people, low-income people, poor people, somewhere between $500 and $1,500 a month, no strings attached, is lifting people out of poverty, getting them back on track, getting them into solid middle-class jobs, helping their children tremendously. This works. Now, we don't have to do UBI in the United States. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have a national health care program. Health expenses are whacking a lot of low-income people. We're the only developed country in the world that doesn't have free college education. Education expenses are whacking people. There's a lot we could do. We can subsidize housing. We can subsidize food. We do that with food stamps. We could expand it. There's a lot we could do to benefit from this. There's a whole report about that over at hartmanreport.com. Check it out. Welcome back. Picking up your calls here. Doug in Southern Arizona. Hey, Doug, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I'm a first-time caller, long-time listener.
Well, thank you, Doug.
But anyway, my question, you're welcome. My question today is, in the 80s, I recall a lot of people saying that there were Russian sleeper spies in our country.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious, do you think some of these and their sons or their children could be in the Congress?
I think that Russia has upped their game. There was a time when if they wanted to sabotage America, they had to infiltrate spies who like on the TV shows, who would come into the country when they were 10 years old or whatever. And, or would come in young and then, 30 years later, they do their dastardly deeds. Now they're just basically paying off Republican politicians with lots of social media help and publicity and maybe money. I mean, who knows? Citizens United made it legal for foreign governments to put money into political campaigns in the United States. So now they're just doing it out in the open, Doug.
Yeah.
I mean, it's far worse. Yeah, it really is. Okay, Doug, thank you very much for the call. Good to hear from you, and thank you for calling. Steve in Rapid City, South Dakota. Hey, Steve, what's on your mind today?
Well, not much, Tom. You were talking earlier about Trump firing all of his lawyers and getting an extension that way. Well, why couldn't the judge just say, well, if you do that, we'll appoint you a lawyer, no problem?
He may. I mean, that might be one of his options. By the way, James and Jennifer Crumley just got 10 years each with the possibility of as much as 15 years for, their son's slaughter of 4 high school students and wounding a whole bunch of others in Michigan. Just FYI. I was talking to Steve.
We all feel, too, that you have to be responsible.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Start over again, Steve. Somehow you got put on hold. I don't know how or why.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just said that Western South Dakota is guns, guns, guns. Yeah. But we all feel that you have to be responsible with your gun, and they were responsible for what he did. So
yeah, I agree.
There you go.
I agree. And now might be a really great time to piggyback on the back of this with, gun safety campaigns and, information about, gun buyback programs and ways that you can get the guns out of your house. And I mean, it would be a great opportunity. I don't know if President Biden is thinking about something like that. I think it would be very synergistic with, at the very least, his effort to bring back the assault weapons ban.
You know, which is, it should be the least we can do, right? I mean, you know, that was bipartisan. It was completely bipartisan. So we'll see where it goes, Steve. Thank you very much for the call.
Yeah, that's really all I had. Yeah, thank
okay,
you.
good talking to you. It's, we're hitting the top of the hour here in about 4 seconds. So on the other side of this break, Trump is hatching plans to put Biden in prison. Are you and I next? And with both millionaires and homelessness on the rise in the U.S., right-wing donors are bankrolling a nationally coordinated effort to end experiments in basic income. Amazing, right? And Biden's got a new plan to relieve student debt for 20 million people already. Republican state attorneys general have filed a lawsuit to stop it already.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Common Sense for the 21st Century by Roger Hallam. The subtitle, Only Nonviolent Rebellion Can Now Stop Climate Breakdown and Social Collapse. This is from the foreword. I was there for the past 20 years. Climate activism. It didn't work. We protested in our hundreds of millions. It didn't work. We raised billions to reach people and politicians. It didn't work. We signed countless online petitions. They didn't work. We looked to the United Nations to resolve the crisis. It didn't work. We trusted progressive politicians and their reforms. That didn't work. Al Gore had a big concert and a PR campaign. It didn't work. Countless NGOs, non-governmental organizations, did their best, and it didn't work. I worked with green NGO campaigns, champagne environmentalists, and lying politicians. I was wasting my time. I had a clue back in 2007 that there might be a fundamental flaw with the reformist approach. The problem with the political influence of the industrial billionaires like the Koch brothers and other fossil fuel bosses. It was another warm night in Los Angeles. I was invited to an exclusive event. A Tesla Roadster prototype was going to be shown to press and guests. We took turns riding around the block. I watched in amazement as the Tesla was at the end of the street in the blink of an eye, with barely a sound. I felt like a caveman seeing a television. Incredible. While I was working on a campaign in 2007, I had an idea for how to save the world with a massive music event and a huge fundraising effort led by celebrities to fund the biggest PR campaign to save the environment. It would be a huge global event, just like Live Aid. I sought out a prominent journalist at the Tesla event to tell about my scheme and bask in the glory of his praise. The journalist was Vijay Vithswaram from The Economist, now a life member of this Council on Foreign Relations. After listening carefully to my concept, he smiled and laughed. I was stunned. Laughter? How could I be so wrong? Vijay wasn't being cruel or unkind. He thought I was naive. He said, the fossil fuel industry has enough money to outspend any public relations campaign you might try by 100 times. He carried on talking, but I had stopped listening. I had my answer. He was right. Crestfallen, I sheepishly nodded and walked away. Over the next 12 years, I watched as fossil fuel companies used their vast financial capital to buy political parties, trick NGOs into fruitless schemes like the U.S. Cap and Trade Initiative, sow doubt about climate science in the public discourse, and slow policy reform to a snail's pace. Their strategy worked. As climate skepticism continued to spread, climate change mitigation dropped down voters' priorities. With Trump and Putin in power, it was over. I quit climate campaigning. Then I heard about Extinction Rebellion closing 5 bridges in London. Then they closed central London in April 2019. This was something different. I met Roger Hallam and he explained his ideas for a radical plan to create real change. This included, first, tell the truth. Climate skepticism was pushed by the mainstream media, which spread doubt on climate science like a plague, leaving inaction in its wake. The scale of the crisis is being played down, and we must get the truth out. Second, nonviolent civil disobedience. We need to get arrested, tens of thousands of us, more. No more protests, no more petitions. Instead, nonviolent civil disobedience, lots of it, and on a large scale. Close down cities until the politicians take action, or until the people do. Third, universalism. In other words, the ecological and climate crisis should not be owned by any political ideology, culture, age, or gender. As Roger Hallam says, we all have a stake in the future. We should all be allowed to engage in action. I was convinced. We need a new approach to save ourselves and the planet. We need to spark a worldwide rebellion. We need some common sense for the 21st century. That foreword was written by, quote, anonymous climate activist. So this now is the introduction to the book. It is time to grow up and see the world as it is. There are some things which are undeniably real. There are some things we cannot change, and one of those is the law of physics. Ice melts when the temperature increases. Crops die in a drought. Trees burn in forest fires. Because these things are real, we can also be certain about what the future holds. We are now heading into a period of extreme ecological collapse. Whether or not this leads to the extinction of the human species largely depends on whether revolutionary changes happen within our societies within the next decade. This is not a matter of ideology, but of simple math and physics. The United Nations has estimated that we need to reduce carbon emissions by half within a decade to have a 50% chance of avoiding a global catastrophe. Of course, this is likely to be an underestimate, as recent science shows permafrost melting 90 years earlier than forecasted and Himalayan glaciers melting twice as fast as expected. The book, Common Sense for the 21st Century, by Roger Hallam, the co-founder of the Extinction Rebellion. The subtitle, Only Nonviolent Rebellion Can Now Stop Climate Breakdown and Social Collapse.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Hey, welcome to the second hour of our program. Trump and the GOP are plotting a 2025 criminal probe of the Bidens. They're announcing it. Right? We're gonna take down Joe Biden. We're gonna prosecute him the way Donald Trump's being prosecuted. That's the essence of it. This over at Axios.com, Stephen Newcomb writing. Excuse me. Republicans' impeachment probe of President Biden. is unraveling because of a lack of evidence, but their work could become the basis for federal investigations and even prosecutions of the Biden family if Donald Trump wins re-election, Axios has learned. Trump has vowed retribution, but people close to Trump are still plotting to use the Justice Department against Biden and his family. Biden was found to have some classified documents from his vice presidency, but he cooperated and returned those documents. But Trump is saying, hey, if you're going to come after me for having documents that I'm not supposed to have, go after Biden too. He's, said this on his Nazi-infested social media site over and over and over again. It's apples and oranges, of course. The documents that Biden had, he didn't know that he had. It was an accident. As soon as he found them or discovered that he had them, he notified the FBI. They came and picked them up. Trump, on the other hand, stole cases of stuff that he thought he could sell. He goes on these rants about how Richard Nixon got $18 million for his presidential papers. And that's why we passed the law, right? in 75 or 74, 75, 76, right in there, the Presidential Records Act, to say, no, those do not belong to you, Mr. Former President. James Comer, the chair of the House Oversight Committee, is just all over this. This is interesting. What's really interesting about Comer, I get it that, like Jeff Tiedrick calls him a Comer pile, that like he's not the brightest bulb in the tree. Gee whiz, golly, or whatever, But, and he has, a little bit of a Kentucky accent that for some folks kind of feeds into that. But I think mostly it's that Comer is really not that bright. But the other thing that I think is interesting is that it got slipped. This was, and it got almost no coverage in the media, but this came out about 2 weeks ago, that Comer is selling a book. He's been shopping a book in New York, and he might have already sold it. And the book is about his impeachment of Joe Biden. And that's why he was willing to hook up with a Russian spy or a Russian agent, intelligence agent, and take information from that Russian intelligence agent about Biden taking bribes in Ukraine that was completely fabricated. And that's why Comer was willing to hook up with a Chinese spy who was, alleging other Biden sins, as it were. And, he's got no evidence, but he's so desperate to do this because he's got this book deal and he's thinking, hey, that book might sell enough copies that I can make some serious money. He goes on, he said in a fundraising email last month that, quote, when President Trump returns to the White House, it's critical the new leadership at the DOJ have everything they need to prosecute the Biden crime family and deliver swift justice. You get this? Biden has not committed, to the best of my knowledge, any crimes at all. His son, had kind of a screwed up life with alcohol and drugs and things like that. He has, to his credit, recovered from that, gotten himself sober, put his life back together. God bless him, right? I doubt there's a family in America that hasn't been touched by the damage of addiction. But, they're just, it's just like when they Caucus, right? Trump basically said to them, they're coming after me, you need to go after them. They impeached me, you need to impeach them. So they tried to impeach Biden, but they couldn't find a crime. So instead, they impeached his HHS or his Department of Homeland Security, DHS Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, and said, oh, he's not doing the job that he needs to be doing down at the border, which is just complete BS. I mean, Mayorkas is doing everything he can. It's Congress. It's Republicans, specifically Republicans in Congress. And this is a distinction that is almost always lost in the mainstream corporate media. They always say, oh, Congress wouldn't pass the law. No, Republicans in Congress wouldn't pass, for example, this bill that was negotiated with James Langford of Oklahoma to strengthen the border and to hire 3,000 new Border Patrol officers and immigration officials. Republicans just didn't want to do it. So it's like this whole thing is just, I don't know, it's out of control. All right, moving along. Meet the secretive rich funding efforts to keep others poor. This is pretty amazing, when you think about it. in the United States, since Reagan imposed neoliberalism on our country, and I wrote an entire book about this, The Hidden History of Neoliberalism, and how Reaganomics gutted America's middle class. Since Reagan threw us into neoliberalism, what we have seen is a steady increase in the wealth of the top 1% of Americans and a steady decrease in the wealth, resources, income, all of the above, of the bottom 80% of us, or maybe 90% of us. I mean, it's bouncing up now thanks to a lot of things that Joe Biden is doing. You know, the wealth is actually on the low end of the scale is actually going up pretty fast, but still the billionaires are getting richer and the multimillionaires and the millionaires are getting richer and richer every single day. And along with that, the poor are getting poorer. We're seeing homelessness like we've never seen before in this country. I mean, maybe we saw this level of homelessness during the Republican Great Depression in the 1930s, but I doubt it was even that serious then. People took people into their homes, you know, people made it through. But now, so in an effort to do something about this, a number of cities and towns have experimented with universal basic income, which is basically where, you know, you give poor people a certain amount of cash, typically $500 to $2,000 a month, with no strings attached, and just, you know, let them work out their life. And what the research has found is that in the vast majority of cases, I mean, yes, there's the occasional person who just uses it to go out and buy cocaine, but the vast majority of cases, people are using this money to stabilize their living situation, to pay their rent, to buy more nutritious food, to help educate their kids, to buy books and you know, things like that. They become more involved in their community. I mean, it's just a healthy thing. But there is this group of very rich individuals, I call them morbidly rich individuals, who are hell-bent for leather on saying we should never give free money to anybody. I don't care how poor they are, because that money comes from me, the rich individuals, and the rich individuals do not want the poor people to be getting their money. I mean, it's really that simple. This is just greed. Very anti-Christian greed on steroids. In February, lawmakers in Arizona, home to the nation's 4th largest homeless rate, this is from Sam Pisagatti over at Common Dreams, by the way, passed a bill that bans, quote, any program where persons are provided with regular periodic cash payments they can use for any purpose, end quote. You get this? Republicans in Arizona passed, you know, pushed legislation through. Now, I believe they've got a Democratic governor there now, so I doubt it's going to go into law. But in Iowa, one GOP state legislator is calling such basic income efforts socialism on steroids, Sam writes. The sponsor of another move to ban basic income, South Dakota's John Wick, is charging that basic income plans amount to, quote, a one-way ticket to government dependency. In February, lawmakers in Arizona, you know, I already mentioned that. As of the end of February, lawmakers in 4 other states had introduced bills with similar bans. And so, you know, Sam asked the question, who's driving this nationally coordinated move to end experiments in basic income? These wealthy people have been bankrolling an outfit that calls itself the Foundation for Government Accountability. And it is, according to this report, quote, a lobbying group with a billionaire-fueled junk science record every American should know about, end quote. And among the founders' prime funders, the hard-right billionaires Richard and Liz Uline, the nation's 4th largest contributors to political campaigns. So other major government for accountability funders include assorted deep-pocketed entities with a history, notes Climate Investigation Center Director Ken Davies, of hating regulation and trying to stop any progress on things like climate change because they see it as almost a step toward communism. Right. You know, you would think that when people get rich, I mean really rich, like the Ulines are billionaires, that they might have a little compassion for the rest of us. But it seems like it goes the opposite direction. It's the Beamer effect, you know, the more expensive the car, the more likely the driver is to behave badly in traffic. It seems to cross all different sectors of behavior.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Biden has a new plan to relieve student debt. I'll tell you about that for 20 million people. I'll tell you about that on the other side of the break. And welcome back. Margaret in East Chester, New York. Hey, Margaret, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Thank you. I would like to say that I wonder if the Opus Dei crowd believes what Trump is saying about going softer on abortion, because they were major, major sponsors of getting him where he is, of the 5, 6, I don't know how many Supreme Court people, but you know what I'm saying, the justices. All of them wanted abortion killed. They lied to get it. Now, if he's backing down, are they going to take his support, or is his speech just another plumb lie?
Yeah. Well, you know, if his lips are moving, he's probably lying. But that said, I think that the media completely misinterpreted Trump's speech yesterday, and they gave him all kinds of benefit of the doubt. What he was essentially saying is the Florida ban, Florida just, you know, is going to a 6-week ban, which is effectively a 100% ban. That's fine with me. The Texas ban and the $10,000 bounties, Trump just yesterday said, that's fine with me. He said all these bans, basically, you know, even ones that don't, he said, I would like to see, you know, exceptions for rape and incest, but even those that don't, he's supporting. So
I think about the New York. I think about the New York side of it. He also said what New York is doing is okay.
Yeah, I'm not believing that for a minute. I mean, Mike Johnson, the head of the Speaker of the House and the head of the Republicans in the House of Representatives, is outspoken in his desire for a national abortion ban. I guarantee you, if the Republicans take the House and Senate and get the White House, God
forbid.
Exactly. Republicans will pass a national abortion ban, and they will send it to Donald Trump for his signature, and he will sign it. I mean, you can take that to the bank.
Well, thank you, because I really was not for once thinking, gee, could he really have changed his mind to something more fair or moral? No, I guess not.
No, he put up his finger and saw which way the wind was blowing is what happened. So there you go.
Well, I hope that he made sure that he told Opus Dei and the others that this was not, and the ecumenicals, et cetera, because that's how he got in.
Yeah, there you go. Margaret, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Yep, good talking to you. Mark in Valley, Washington. Hey, Mark, what's on your mind today?
Hey, good morning, Tom. I don't know why everybody's so upset. We got the best best government money can buy.
Yeah, if you've got the money. That's the problem.
But what I'm calling for is, I don't know if this is possible, but why can't Biden declare a national security emergency? Because we all know that
declare what? A national security emergency.
This thing with Ukraine.
Oh, okay.
Not getting the weapons they need.
Yeah.
Because we all know that if Putin's allowed to take Ukraine, he'll regroup and he'll keep moving on.
Yep.
Which could easily pull NATO and America into World War III.
Exactly. And in fact, the lead diplomat for the European Union this morning came out and said that we are now anticipating the possibility of a ground war in Europe.
Okay, so why can't Biden just say, all right, it's a national security emergency, we're going to divert weapons that we were going to send to Israel because they're not cooperating, and we're going to send them to Ukraine?
I'm not sure that a national security emergency allows him to do that. I mean, there are all these limitations on weaponry to any country that are imposed by Congress and by law. I just don't, I'm not sure that would work, Mark. I'm guessing if it would work, he would have done it by now. But, you know,
I'd say do it and let courts fight it out.
I'm with you. I'm with you. Mark, thank you. Missed my opening rant today? It's usually published over at HartmannReport.com, where you can read it and share it with your friends for free. Check it out, HartmannReport.com. So a lot of people are wondering, why is it in America that we can't have nice things? Why don't we have, you know, the same things every other democracy has? Every other democracy in the world has a national health care system of some form, and everybody is covered. We don't. We've got 27 million uninsured people and over 100 million underinsured people. Why is that? Why is it that every other country in the world offers college education very inexpensively, if not for free, and for here you go to debt? Why is it that we've got our public schools crumbling and other countries are doing well? Why is it that we've got Medicare being taken apart by this Medicare Advantage scam and nobody will do anything about it? Well, it turns out the reason why it boils down to one thing, one Supreme Court decision, Citizens United, legalizing the bribery of our politicians. There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. I think you're going to find it very, very useful. Check it out. Welcome back. Biden makes another pitch for student loan relief, but challenges loom. That's the headline over at the Washington Post today. President Biden on yesterday laid out plans to forgive some or all student loans for more than 30 million Americans, trying to expand on his administration's work to reduce debt burdens, but offering a narrow path for forgiveness than a plan that was struck down by the Supreme Court. He said, too many Americans, especially young people, are saddled with unsustainable debts in exchange for a college degree. This was in Madison, Wisconsin. Biden said this. The ability for working and middle-class folks to repay their student loans has become so burdensome that a lot can't repay it for even decades after being in school. Since taking office, Biden has forgiven $140 billion worth of student loans to 4 million people. And now he's proposing to reduce student debt for another 30 million people. But last week, nearly a dozen state attorneys general sued. They filed a lawsuit to stop any repayment plans by President Biden. And, you know, the last time they did this, it went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, yeah, we agree with the Republicans. You know, student debt should stay on the books. These people should, you know, pay it back with their own, you know, et cetera. The plan focuses on select groups of borrowers, those who owe more than they originally borrowed because of interest, those who've been paying for at least 20 to 25 years, those who attended career training programs that led to high debt loads or low earnings, those who are eligible for existing forgiveness programs but never applied, and those experiencing hardship. A key feature is the planned elimination of up to $20,000, this is from the Washington Post, in accrued interest for borrowers, regardless of their income. Single borrowers earning less than $120,000 or married couples earning less than $240,000 could qualify to have all of their accrued interest forgiven if they are enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan. This is what Joe Biden does. This is what Democrats do. We're going to reduce the debt, and this is going to be a stimulus to the United States. These people, if they're not paying loan payments, they can buy a house, they can start a family, they can start a business, they can do the things that people do when they have a little economic breathing room. And that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. All righty, picking up your calls here, Mark in Brennan, Washington. Hey, Mark, what's up?
Hey, Tom, thanks for taking my call. Before I get to my issue, I just have two suggestions on the MTG nicknames you asked for a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
I think Mean Taylor Green or Marjorie Failure Green.
Oh, I like those. Okay. So what do you want to talk about today?
So I'm a boomer like you, maybe a little younger, but I can't talk to my generation. Here's an example. Back during the 2016 primary season, one of my colleagues in Chicago, really right-wing, to the right of Reagan even, he gets on the phone and we're chatting and he goes, you know, I kind of like that Bernie guy. So there was nothing about issues. This is all ad hominem. How do you talk to people that don't even understand what the issues are?
Well, it's interesting, Mark, because when I lived during that primary, I was living in Washington, D.C. and at the Capitol Yacht Club. I was living on a boat in a marina. And probably 20%, 30% of the people who lived in that marina were ex-military, most of them Navy. Some of them actually on active duty. And 7 or 8 of these people who were hardcore Republican voters were all voted for Biden, or excuse me, for Bernie in the primary. And it was because they liked what he had to say. They liked his policies.
Well, I know this guy didn't like his policies because like I say, he's a right-wing maniac. He just liked the older white guy, I think.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I thought Trump stole a bunch of Bernie's policies, essentially. Bernie said he wanted to have, health care for everybody. Trump said he was going to cancel Obamacare and give everybody much better health care. Trump said that he was going to stop foreign imports. Bernie says he's going to stop foreign imports. Trump said he was going to support labor. Bernie says he supports labor. I mean, Trump was lying through his teeth in every instance, but he campaigned in about half of his platform was Bernie's platform, so that may have something to do with it. Mark, I got to run.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Back with more of your calls on the other side of this break. Stay with us.
Today we're reading from David Enrich's book, Dark Towers, Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump, and an Epic Trail of Destruction. This is from Chapter 10. It's titled The Mar-a-Lago Prize. In 1905, a German immigrant living in the Bronx set up a small barber shop on the ground floor of a newly constructed building at 60 Wall Street, in the heart of Manhattan's booming financial district. In an era before skyscrapers, the 25-story L-shaped tower was a landmark, its gargoyle-guarded roof visible from the nearby waterfront. The barbershop thrived, offering shaves and trims to a procession of bankers, stock exchange traders, lawyers, and office workers. Barber's name was Frederick Trump. The same year that he opened the shop, his wife gave birth to a boy named Fred. Many years passed, and the barbershop closed, and the old 60 Wall Street gave way in 1989 to a new 60 Wall Street, a 47-story tower topped with a distinctive pyramid roof. For a time, it was home to J.P. Morgan and Company. Then the bank left, and in 2005, Deutsche Bank started relocating its American staff, displaced ever since 9/11, to its new home at 60 Wall Street. And so Frederick Trump's grandson, born to Fred's wife in 1946, became an occasional visitor to the site of his grandfather's old barber shop. Deutsche's relationship with Donald Trump had only deepened since Mike Offit left. Justice Justin Kennedy, this is the son of Justice Anthony Kennedy, Justin Kennedy, now a managing director, had become a key point contact for Trump and helped chaperone large real estate deals for him through the bank. Kennedy's role was to find customers to buy portions of loans after Deutsche dispensed the money, a process that allowed Deutsche Bank to make larger loans than it otherwise could have. Kennedy sometimes sat with Trump in his luxury box at the U.S. Open tennis tournament or at Manhattan nightclubs, where Trump would park himself at a table in the corner facing outward, holding court like a mafia don. Now, with Kennedy's encouragement, Deutsche hurried along a Henry Villard-like path. In 2000, the bank had plunked down another $150 million to be used for the renovations of Trump's building at 40 Wall Street. The next year, Deutsche agreed to extend Trump a mortgage worth more than $900 million, at the time the largest ever on a single property, so he could buy the General Motors building on the southeastern corner of New York's Central Park. Trump already owned half of the 50-story building. He wanted the rest. And in 2002, Deutsche agreed to refinance about $70 million that he owed on some of his Atlantic City casinos. Those loans came out of Deutsche's commercial real estate division, which Kennedy was helping to run. Not everyone was enamored with Trump. Seth Waugh, W-A-U-G-H, one of Edson's many Merrill Lynch recruits and the head of Deutsche's American operations, learned around 2001 that the bank was planning to lend Trump about $500 million to use as he wished, basically an unrestricted cash infusion to stabilize the developer's flagging finances. Waugh had previously witnessed up close the carnage that Trump could inflict on imprudent financial institutions. At Merrill, Edison had assigned him the task of mopping up after Trump defaulted on nearly $700 million of bonds that Merrill had helped sell for his Taj Mahal casino in Atlantic City. Waugh was in no hurry to repeat the experience at Deutsche. He voiced strong objections to the proposed new loan to Trump, in which Trump would not have had to put up any hard assets as collateral, and the deal soon died. Yet Deutsche's broader Trump relationship rumbled on. In 2003, another arm of Deutsche, focused on helping companies raise money by selling stocks and bonds to investors, agreed to work with Trump. The point man on this part of the relationship was Richard Byrne, another Merrill veteran who had been involved in the Taj Mahal debacle. Byrne had helped sell the ill-fated Taj bonds to investors. Now Trump hired Byrne's group at Deutsche to issue bonds for his troubled Trump hotel and casino resorts. Byrne knew this would be an uphill battle. Not only had Trump defaulted in the past, but he also had recently been taunting investors that he might stop paying back other outstanding bonds. Waugh didn't warn Byrne about the recently rejected $500 million loan, and so Byrne organized a roadshow for Trump to meet with and try to win over big institutional investors. He escorted Trump to meetings all over New York and Boston. At every stop, boardrooms and auditoriums were jammed with traders, fund managers, senior executives, and secretaries curious to see the Donald show, and Trump didn't disappoint. He rocked, he rolled, and he delivered wildly optimistic and inconsistent financial projections. Afterward, Trump called Byrne to ask how much money they'd raised. The answer, alas, was virtually zero. Byrne braced for an explosion as he explained to Trump that though he'd been treated like a celebrity, nobody trusted him with their money. Trump took the rejection in stride. "Let me talk to your salespeople," he requested. Byrne agreed, and Trump came to deliver a pep talk. "Fellas, I know this isn't the easiest thing you've all had to sell," he acknowledged, "but if you get this done, you'll all be my guests at Mar-a-Lago." Trump was always good at pushing an audience's buttons. A weekend with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, bragging rights that not even money could buy, and this new incentive did the trick. The salesman worked the phones, cast a wider net for more clients, and managed to sell an impressive $485 million of junk bonds, albeit at a high interest rate that reflected investors' fears that Trump might default. The book Dark Towers by David Enrich.
Hey, if you like the rants that I open the show with every day, they're typically published over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Recently, I did an op-ed and a little rant here about what happens when you raise the top income tax rate on morbidly rich people to 90%. How, that helps reduce income inequality and funds the government, all kinds of good positive things. What about corporate taxes? We really need to go back to the 50% top corporate income tax rate that we had under Dwight Eisenhower, for example. The reason why is not on the assumption that we're going to collect all that money, but what it does is it causes corporations to change their behavior, to do things to try to get tax deductions so they don't have to pay that in taxes. And what are the main things they do? They develop new products. They do research and development. They become more competitive. They open up new stores. They pay their employees better. They offer better benefits. All of these things are 100% tax deductible and thus lower their corporate income taxes and help out America. You can read all about it over at HartmannReport.com. Okay, breaking news here out of Arizona. Oops, hang on just a second. Let me get back to it. This is amazing. The Arizona Supreme Court, Arizona's turning blue kind of slowly. But it's a big but. Every single one of the justices on their Supreme Court, that's 5 men and 2 women, were appointed by Republicans. And these justices just ruled, literally minutes ago, that all abortions are now illegal in Arizona. Arizona used to have a 15-week ban, but now it's all abortions, except for to save a woman's life. In fact, the justices wrote in their opinion, quote, "Physicians are now on notice that all abortions except those necessary to save a woman's life are illegal and that additional criminal and regulatory sanctions may apply." Really? This comes after Florida's court essentially did the same thing, effective next month. And in a separate move, the High Court in Tallahassee allowed an amendment enshrining the right to the procedure to go on the November ballot. I find this just fascinating.
Republicans are just shooting themselves in the foot with this. And I'm expecting you're going to see massive voter turnout in Arizona this fall. So, what's on your mind? Steve in Perryville, Missouri. Hey, Steve, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Before I get to my subject, yeah, you're right, because the women are actually going to make sure Joe Biden wins. I'm telling you.
I think so.
You're right about stabbing them themselves in the foot every day. Yeah, and I think the judges, I know they know it too. So I believe they're actually on our side. You know what I mean? To get the thing going.
No, they're not. These are one of these judges wrote on Facebook that, and he recused himself as a result of it. But from this decision, it was 6 of them that made the decision. But he wrote on Facebook that abortion is the worst Holocaust in the history of humankind. These are true believers. They think that they're saving babies.
You would think that he would be smart enough to realize that if Biden remains in there, he's going to seat more Supreme Court justices,
they don't care.
Which is only going to benefit us.
Right. They don't care, though. They don't care what the consequences of their actions are. They just this is a moral issue for them. These are true believers. These are people who believe that God is telling them what to do, and they can't pay attention to humans' laws and all that kind of thing. They've got to do what God wants, and whether they're Catholics listening to the Pope or whether they're evangelicals listening to their local televangelist. That's where they're at, Steve. But that's not what you called about. You called about Ukraine, didn't you?
That is correct. Okay. You and probably all your listeners would agree that this conflict with Ukraine and Russia is an existential threat to the entire world.
I agree.
When you
it
look
could trip
at
off World War III.
That's correct. And, I just heard this morning that the president is all out of options until the election if we can win. And I believe there's one option that he hasn't tried. I don't think. Progressives have multi-billionaires as well. And I was thinking, well, how about our government give them an IOU with interest? Because it will affect them as well, their corporations.
That would be considered an appropriation. That requires Congress. The only government entity that can spend money or raise taxes is Congress, period.
No, I'm talking about a donation to our government.
From who? From American billionaires?
That is correct.
Well, we're trying to come up with $60 to $80 billion for Ukraine here. I would be surprised if.
Well, how much is Warren Buffett worth?
Well, I'm not sure Warren Buffett is all that gung-ho for Democrats. He's kind of in the middle. He's not very politically active, but most of these guys.
If World War III happens, it's going to affect them as well. I mean, they can't hide from the radiation and the bomb.
Well, many of them actually are buying and building bomb shelters in old missile silos. They're building little underground cities and things. But notwithstanding that, I don't disagree with your analysis, Steve, but I just, there's no way that billionaires are going to be funding this, or that they should. I mean, this Mike Johnson is not doing his job. It's just that simple. The majority of members of Congress, the majority of Republicans even in Congress, want aid to Ukraine. And here's Mike Johnson and Marjorie Taylor Greene, holding it up. And just because they want to kowtow to Donald Trump and to Vladimir Putin. And that's a real problem. Steve, thanks for the call. Keno in Lakeland, Florida. Hey, Keno, what's up?
Hey, Tom, I got a symbolic interpretation of the eclipse yesterday.
Okay.
It was a visitation from Mother God. The moon represents Mother God, and it occurred on Moon Day, Monday, and it was to cool off this heating from climate change, this earth, and also to cool off these two wars in the Ukraine and Israel. So if we would ask our ministers to explain Jeremiah 44:18 that talks about the Queen of Heaven, and they got rid of Mother God. If we bring her back, now in Asia, she's Lady Kuan Yin, the goddess of mercy. This world needs mercy. So symbolically, she visited us and put a shadow on us to try to indicate that this earth, there's some places that need to be cooled off, these two hot wars and this climate change. And so the Holy Spirit originally was Mother God, and these misogynists got rid of Mother God, and we got to bring her back and adore women and make society work for the good of women, like people that worship Mother God do that. So symbolic representation, let's spread the word that Mother God wants to come back and be adored and worshipped.
I like it. Keno, thank you very much. That's great. Good talking to you. Tom in Media, Pennsylvania. Hey, Tom, what's up?
Yes, Tom, you're saying, and you said even the show, and you've repeated this, that, people that vote against their economic self-interests are not really intelligent voters in a lot of ways, and I certainly agree. Now, I'm middle class, and I support things that are good for me economically, and I oppose things that aren't good for me. And this is why I would absolutely oppose a universal basic income for those on the bottom 20% of this country, because if you pay them thousands of dollars in cash that they wouldn't normally see, this is definitely going to increase demand, and that's going to increase our already high inflation for the middle class. And that's unacceptable in itself if the middle class doesn't get anything commensurate. And no matter how you pay for this, the middle class will be harmed, because if you say you're going to just tax the corporations or unearned income, that's really going to hurt middle-class retirement benefits. So I'm taking your advice, Tom, and voting for my economic self-interest, or supporting things that help my interest and opposing them that don't. And for that reason, I would say most middle-class people would be, totally against an unrestricted cash universal income, because it would definitely hurt us.
So, number one, the alternative would be to raise the minimum wage and let people unionize. That would cover about half of it, because a lot of these people are the working poor, and expand welfare programs. But I disagree with your premise, Tom. You're right that if we passed out cash to a bunch of people in the bottom 20%, that it would stimulate the economy. But economic stimulus doesn't have to produce inflation. Inflation is the result of too much demand chasing too few goods. But we've got our economy back together again. We're manufacturing again in this country. There's plenty of goods and there's plenty of services. I don't think it would work that way.
I think you're absolutely wrong, Tom. First of all, inflation is still too high. We don't have our economy 100% back together.
No, but we're getting there. And inflation's around 3%. And 3% was considered a good number by Alan Greenspan. I mean, that's what he was trying to keep it to during
2%'s optimum.
Well, maybe
2%'s optimum.
I think 2% is frankly too low.
And this is increase on a huge increase that we've seen what happens before when you had and it can't not help but hurt the middle class, Tom.
Yeah, no, that's wrong, Tom. It would help the middle class because you're not going to have homeless people. You're not going to have people falling into addiction. You're not going to have people falling into desperate circumstances because of their poverty. You're going to increase, essentially, the middle class, the lower middle class. And that's a good thing for everybody. You're going to see less crime. No, this is what the studies show. When you look at what has happened, these people, people who get this kind of aid, by and large, start getting housing, start getting jobs, go back to school, start putting their lives together. That benefits all of us, Tom. It benefits absolutely all of us. No, you're wrong. And that's that. It's 45 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of your calls on the other side of this break. It's your media support group for We the People, the Thom Hartmann Program. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Trump just lost his second effort to postpone his election interference trial. It's going to get interesting next week. And welcome back. Let's see here. Nicole in Memphis, Tennessee. Hey, Nicole, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. I wanted to jump in on this discussion about universal basic income. And it looks like people are going to probably get a lot of backlash with that. And I think what Democrats need to run on is cutting the tax on Social Security benefits.
Yeah.
We can take that issue right to the Republicans. We can steal their issue, and tax cuts are easy. People understand it, and end the tax. End all taxes on.
I would change the language somewhat, Nicole. I would say end the Reagan tax on Social Security, because Ronald Reagan was the one who put that tax into place.
Absolutely. Let's get it out there as a major issue. I think we could really win on that.
I agree. And, when Social Security was first rolled out in 33, it was tax-free. And it was right up until the 1980s, right up until, I believe it was 86 that Reagan had his big Social Security reforms. No, it was 83. Now it's taxable, which is just bizarre. Nicole, thank you. Spot on. Spot on. Good one. David in Woodland Hills, California. Hey, David, what's on your mind today?
Thank you, Guru. 30-second rant. So this morning, Stephanie Miller said that the media...
David, your phone is breaking up. I'm going to put you on hold here and pick up another call. Mark, David's on line 2. You can figure out what's going on with his phone. Rudy in Atlanta. Hey, Rudy, what's on your mind today?
Real quick, Tom. Tom, he has it wrong. You have to understand, when you put money on the bottom, everyone gets a taste of it. When you continue to let these billionaires have money, they just reinvest or they just keep the money. So
exactly.
I don't understand what he's talking about. Quickly, the forgiveness, that's a winner. I will fight that to the end, because these kids, these students, I was in church Sunday. There was a testimonial. Man, I tell you, this couple, you would have thought they hit the lottery. They had the government had forgiven, Joe Biden had forgiven one of their tax, the student loans. And man, I tell you, these people were crying in the middle of the church, Tom. It was a tearful. It was wonderful. And the last thing I was telling Mark, we're just infested, man. You had a gentleman that was talking about those Russians. I mean, we are infested. These people, they have just infested this country to no end. They are in almost every sector in this country.
Who are these people you're talking about here, Rudy?
I'm just talking about the people that like Russians, the people that are willing to throw themselves overboard for Trump and Putin.
Crazy right-wingers, yeah, I get it.
Yes. We're just infested. But along with abortion and the student forgiveness, that's what's going to win Joe Biden the presidency. So we need to lean hard on the student forgiveness thing, Tom.
Yeah.
Lean into that hard.
Oh, it's transforming people's lives. It's getting them out of debt.
Yes.
They can start a family. They can buy a house. They can, start a business.
Breathe.
Yeah, exactly. Well said. Rudy, thank you.
Take care.
Thanks a lot for the call, and thanks for sharing that story with us. That was great. It's 49 minutes past the hour. I'll be right back with you in about 60 seconds. Stay tuned. Hey, thanks so much for sharing our program and for reaching out to our stations and sponsors and letting them know that you're listening. It really means a lot to us. Back in 2010, when Viktor Orban took over the Fidesz party in Hungary, that party was sort of like the Republican Party. It was just a conventional conservative European political party. And he has turned it into a neo-fascist powerhouse. He pushed through he altered the nation's constitution to push through what we would call gerrymandering and voter suppression so that his party will always win. He campaigned on building a wall. Build a wall was literally one of his campaign slogans, and he did build a wall across the southern border of Hungary to keep out Syrian refugees who were fleeing the violence when Russia was bombing that country. His other two campaign slogans were, and I quote, "Restore Christian purity and make Hungary great again." Seriously, back in 2010, 6 years before Trump.
There's an amazing backstory about how Viktor Orban is being cloned, essentially, in the GOP. You can find the article over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. Nine minutes before the hour, picking up your calls here. Patty in Newark, New York. Hey, Patty, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I just wanted to find out if you've talked much about the Affordable Connectivity Plan. Spectrum is what we have in this area, and they've decided, I guess, the government is no longer funding for some states. I've heard some states say that they are, and in New York, where I am, they're not funding that anymore. It was a $30 credit per month on your internet service.
Did that start during the pandemic, Patty?
Yes, it did. Yes, it did.
So that's one of those bills, one of those pieces of legislation that the Democrats have been trying to get renewed, that the Republicans have been stalling and fighting on.
Oh, I see. I see. I was just wondering if something happened, but basically the Republicans don't want.
Well, that's what happened. The Republicans took control of the House of Representatives 16 months ago.
Yes. Okay. All right. Well, that's,
Sorry.
Crazy.
But
Isn't
thanks
that
for the call.
terrible?
Yeah, good talking to you,
Thanks,
Patty.
sir.
Thank you. Paul in Toledo, Ohio. Hey, Paul, what's on your mind today?
Yeah, I don't know. I got a couple of things on my mind. Number one is the Project 2025.
Okay.
If this is important and dangerous, which I think it is, why is it not being discussed more in the Senate, Congress, on the news? We should be hearing about this big time if we're going to stop it.
Yeah, I don't think you can stop it. I mean, this is a private organization. Actually, it's a coalition of private organizations, kind of overseen, kind of an umbrella being the Heritage Foundation. And they can do anything they want. I mean, you and I could get together, Paul, and we could create a Project 2025 too, with completely different contents, of course. But it doesn't mean that anybody would pay attention to it unless Joe Biden came out and said, yeah, I'm going to do that. Trump, I'm not sure that Trump has actually said he's going to put into place Project 2025, but people around him certainly have. And so the way to discuss it would be in the context of, a Trump presidency and the downside to us. It's pretty radical stuff.
I don't think it much matters who they put in. If it's a Republican, they're going to go with it.
That's correct. And they've said that, Paul. They've said that. This is for the next Republican administration. It might be this year. It might be in 4 years.
The other issue I have is with the Christian right is way off base, and more people that are true Christians need to get out and start pushing it back, because to me, Christianity is the followers of Christ. They're not supposed to be going to the Old Testament and finding all this junk that they're throwing out. Jesus said he didn't come to abolish the law, he came to fulfill it. Mm-hmm. And whenever you fulfill something, you're done with it.
Yeah. And that's the essence of Matthew, the first Matthew 5 through 8, the Sermon on the Mount, and Matthew 25, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Feed the hungry, protect the children, house the homeless, heal the sick.
Love, empathy, sympathy, and inclusion. He didn't teach hatred and false prophets.
He was the original DEI guy.
That's it. He was woke.
There you go.
Listen to Ron DeSantis. He was woke.
Yeah, exactly. Jesus was the original liberal. He really and truly was. Paul, I got to move along, but thanks for the call. Your points are well taken. Charles in Vancouver, Washington. Hey, Charles, what's up?
Hey, good morning again, Professor. Hey, the bad news and the good news. The bad news is that I just heard this morning that some court deemed the ban on high-capacity magazines on the guns here in the state of Washington as unconstitutional.
Oh,
so it's going to go to higher court. And I heard I don't know correct information. I heard the Washington State Supreme Court.
Yeah.
So, and then that's the bad news. The good news, Professor, I have not heard of any human sacrifice that took place during the totality of the eclipse.
Well, there's still time to find the bodies,
All right, Professor, thank you.
Marjorie Taylor Greene is convinced that this is, a sign that the end is nigh, and, we all need to fall on our knees and pray. And, it's hard to know how much of what she says, and the people like her, is, sincere versus just theater to try to get on Fox News. It's wild. But, yeah.
Well, Tom, the fact that Lauren Boebert, I guess, got reelected for her district in Colorado.
Yeah, well, it was a year and a half ago. I think she's going to lose this time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's
yeah.
changed districts, and I think that she's going to be like a fish out of water.
God, man, what next, Tom? I don't know.
Frogs raining out of the sky?
I don't know.
Plagues of
anyway,
locusts?
I tell everybody about free speech TV. I always have to let you know that.
There you go. Well, thank you, Charles.
Okay?
Good. That's really important. Thank you so much. Thank you. We're hitting the top of the hour here. On the other side of this break, Norman Ohler is going to be with us. He's got a new book about LSD and the CIA and Nazi Germany.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free, and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the HartmannReport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.
We say fight back!
From David Enrich's book, Dark Towers, Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump, and an Epic Trail of Destruction. This is from Chapter 10. It's titled The Mar-a-Lago Prize. In 1905, a German immigrant living in the Bronx set up a small barber shop on the ground floor of a newly constructed building at 60 Wall Street, in the heart of Manhattan's booming financial district. In an era before skyscrapers, the 25-story L-shaped tower was a landmark, its gargoyle-guarded roof visible from the nearby waterfront. The barbershop thrived, offering shaves and trims to a procession of bankers, stock exchange traders, lawyers, and office workers. Barber's name was Frederick Trump. The same year that he opened the shop, his wife gave birth to a boy named Fred. Many years passed, and the barbershop closed, and the old 60 Wall Street gave way in 1989 to a new 60 Wall Street, a 47-story tower topped with a distinctive pyramid roof. For a time, it was home to J.P. Morgan and Company. Then the bank left, and in 2005, Deutsche Bank started relocating its American staff, displaced ever since 9/11, to its new home at 60 Wall Street. And so Frederick Trump's grandson, born to Fred's wife in 1946, became an occasional visitor to the site of his grandfather's old barber shop. Deutsche's relationship with Donald Trump had only deepened since Mike Offit left. Justice Justin Kennedy, this is the son of Justice Anthony Kennedy. Justin Kennedy, now a managing director, had become a key point contact for Trump and helped chaperone large real estate deals for him through the bank. Kennedy's role was to find customers to buy portions of loans after Deutsche dispensed the money, a process that allowed Deutsche Bank to make larger loans than it otherwise could have. Kennedy sometimes sat with Trump in his luxury box at the U.S. Open tennis tournament or at Manhattan nightclubs, where Trump would park himself at a table in the corner facing outward, holding court like a mafia don. Now, with Kennedy's encouragement, Deutsche hurried along a Henry Villard-like path. In 2000, the bank had plunked down another $150 million to be used for the renovations of Trump's building at 40 Wall Street. The next year, Deutsche agreed to extend Trump a mortgage worth more than $900 million, at the time the largest ever on a single property, so he could buy the General Motors building on the southeastern corner of New York's Central Park. Trump already owned half of the 50-story building. He wanted the rest. And in 2002, Deutsche agreed to refinance about $70 million that he owed on some of his Atlantic City casinos. Those loans came out of Deutsche's commercial real estate division, which Kennedy was helping to run. Not everyone was enamored with Trump. Seth Waugh, W-A-U-G-H, one of Edson's many Merrill Lynch recruits and the head of Deutsche's American operations, learned around 2001 that the bank was planning to lend Trump about $500 million to use as he wished, basically an unrestricted cash infusion to stabilize the developer's flagging finances. Waugh had previously witnessed up close the carnage that Trump could inflict on imprudent financial institutions. At Merrill, Edison had assigned him the task of mopping up after Trump defaulted on nearly $700 million of bonds that Merrill had helped sell for his Taj Mahal casino in Atlantic City. Waugh was in no hurry to repeat the experience at Deutsche. He voiced strong objections to the proposed new loan to Trump, in which Trump would not have had to put up any hard assets as collateral, and the deal soon died. Yet Deutsche's broader Trump relationship rumbled on. In 2003, another arm of Deutsche, focused on helping companies raise money by selling stocks and bonds to investors, agreed to work with Trump. The point man on this part of the relationship was Richard Byrne, another Merrill veteran who had been involved in the Taj Mahal debacle. Byrne had helped sell the ill-fated Taj bonds to investors. Now Trump hired Byrne's group at Deutsche to issue bonds for his troubled Trump hotel and casino resorts. Byrne knew this would be an uphill battle. Not only had Trump defaulted in the past, but he also had recently been taunting investors that he might stop paying back other outstanding bonds. Waugh didn't warn Byrne about the recently rejected $500 million loan, and so Byrne organized a roadshow for Trump to meet with and try to win over big institutional investors. He escorted Trump to meetings all over New York and Boston. At every stop, boardrooms and auditoriums were jammed with traders, fund managers, senior executives, and secretaries curious to see the Donald show, and Trump didn't disappoint. He rocked, he rolled, and he delivered wildly optimistic and inconsistent financial projections. Afterward, Trump called Byrne to ask how much money they'd raised. The answer, alas, was virtually zero. Byrne braced for an explosion as he explained to Trump that though he'd been treated like a celebrity, nobody trusted him with their money. Trump took the rejection in stride. "Let me talk to your salespeople," he requested. Byrne agreed, and Trump came to deliver a pep talk. "Fellas, I know this isn't the easiest thing you've all had to sell," he acknowledged, "but if you get this done, you'll all be my guests at Mar-a-Lago." Trump was always good at pushing an audience's buttons. A weekend with Trump at Mar-a-Lago, bragging rights that not even money could buy, and this new incentive did the trick. The salesman worked the phones, cast a wider net for more clients, and managed to sell an impressive $485 million of junk bonds, albeit at a high interest rate that reflected investors' fears that Trump might default. The book Dark Towers by David Enrich.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the third hour of our program. Those of you who listen to our book reports during the breaks, those are mostly just on our nonprofit stations, while our for-profit stations are in commercial breaks. I just recorded a new one, Tripped, Nazi Germany, the CIA, and the Dawn of the Psychedelic Age by Norman Ohler. He's the New York Times bestselling author of Blitzed. And he's with us. Norman is a novelist, screenwriter, and journalist based in Berlin, Germany. He's author of this new book, Tripped, Nazi Germany, the CIA, and the Dawn of the Psychedelic Age. Norman, ohler.de is his website, and it's Norman, OHLER on Twitter. Norman, welcome to the program. What got you started on this book?
Hi, I'm very happy to talk about these ideas that I try to research. For me, the book started at home with my family. I had read a white paper of an American startup called Elusive. They claimed that microdosed LSD would be good against Alzheimer because microdosed LSD would stimulate the very same receptors that Alzheimer degenerates. And I discussed this with my mother, who suffers from Alzheimer at an earlier stage back then when we started, and with my father, who had been a judge in Germany, quite a high judge, actually, not a drug person at all, actually sent people to prison for drugs. So for him, this was new territory. And he said to me, if LSD might be helpful for diseases like dementia, and also depression could be treated with psychedelic compounds, why can't I, he asked me, why can't I go to the pharmacy of our small town and just buy it if it's so helpful? So I said, I will research this for you. This will be my new book. And I did find actually very interesting occurrences in the very early history of LSD, when the Swiss pharmaceutical company who discovered it was very hopeful to turn it into a medicine. So I researched what went wrong with LSD. Why does it have such a bad reputation these days? Why did it become illegal in the first place? And can it actually help us now, or is it dangerous and should be forbidden?
Yeah, it's certainly potent. I have taken LSD multiple times in my life. It's been a lot of years since then, but it's potent stuff, and it's transformational stuff too. What do you talk about Nazi Germany and the CIA? How do these things get into there?
Yeah, this is a curious story, actually. While I was in the archives of Novartis pharmaceutical company who swallowed Sandoz, the inventors of LSD, I found interesting documents that led from the CEO, the Swiss CEO, Arthur Stoll of Sandoz, in the mid-40s to Richard Kuhn, who was the leading Nazi biochemist. Because these two men had actually been friends and they had shared information. And then when Sandoz discovered LSD, and they actually had no idea what it was
You're talking about Albert Hoffman here, right?
Well, Albert Hoffman is the chemist who discovered it, and Stoll is his boss. So his boss basically called the shots what the company would do with it. That was that no one's actually ever examined that CEO, because he's the crucial guy. I mean, he didn't discover LSD, but he had it on his hands, and they actually formed a tripping room within the company in the mid-40s, where employees could go in and take LSD, and no one knew anything about it. And the employees just said things. I read all the reports, they were amazed how good they felt, that they could think about their life very clearly. They looked outside the window and admired the beauty of the clouds. Like, they were actually tripping, but everyone had a good experience, and people who were a little bit down or had no energy suddenly were revived. And so Sandoz thought that this was a game changer maybe for mental health, because at the time there were no antidepressants, antipsychotics. This all didn't exist. So LSD was like the first medicine that would actually heal people's minds. And he discussed this with Richard Kuhn on the German side, kind of naively. But Richard Kuhn, because they had been friends since the 20s. I mean, there's a Swiss guy and a German guy. They're friends. They're sharing information. So Stoll tells them, we have this powerful thing that works on the mind. We don't know yet how it works and what we could do with this. And Richard Kuhn, who was, working for Nazi Germany, developing nerve gases. And I mean, he was a leading biochemist for Hitler. And one of his jobs was also to think about a so-called truth drug. This was a secret program of the Nazis. Can we find a drug with which we can improve our interrogation technique? So Kuhn thought maybe this is maybe LSD, maybe this is it. So the Nazis, the SS, made tests at the concentration camp of Dachau, giving inmates LSD and mescaline, doing human experiments, basically, without telling these inmates, these prisoners, we're giving you something now. They just drank a cup of coffee, but there was LSD or mescaline in it, so they started tripping. And so these experiments fell into the hands of the American military when they liberated Germany and the Dachau concentration camp. And the American military got very interested in it because, you know, if this is a new type of weapon, maybe this LSD, we should maybe use it in the Cold War, which was then starting. So they let the SS experiments be evaluated by a Harvard professor who was an expert in drugs, and he wrote back, yeah, maybe this could be a good weapon. Maybe we could, you know, attack a Soviet battleship, kind of poison, you know, infuse their water supply with LSD. They would all be tripping. They couldn't fight anymore. So these were this kind of thinking led then to the CIA developing LSD as a potential weapon. So the dream of Sandoz, the company, to turn it into a medicine was early on blocked by, you know, this, I think, naive communication that the CEO had with the Nazi biochemist. So you can trace that communication all the way then back into the United States.
That's amazing. Back in the 60s, a friend of mine was going to MIT, and he got sucked into the CIA without realizing it. Into the CIA LSD experiments and was given LSD without his consent. And that was not a good experience.
It can't be, you know, it's such a powerful substance. You cannot give it to someone without, you know, telling that person. It's a cruel experiment.
It really was. I think he's still wounded by it. I'm wondering, you mentioned that there was an assertion that LSD could be therapeutic for dementia or Alzheimer's. Has that been followed up? Is that true?
Well, that's what the startup companies worldwide are now trying to investigate and examine. And slowly the laws are softening, and it's easier than like 20 years ago or 10 years ago to make these clinical tests, but it's still not so easy. You have to, you know, fill in a lot of paperwork and to get permission to work with these substances because they're still controlled substances. That is kind of the catch-22 with the psychedelics when Nixon proclaimed the war on drugs in the 60s and made also LSD and mushrooms, psilocybin, illegal. From that moment on, it was even illegal to examine whether it is dangerous. They were so dangerous you couldn't even examine whether that's true. And now, I mean, the findings are pretty clear that psychedelic compounds, especially LSD, enhances so-called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the ability of the brain, or the behavior of the brain, you could say, to constantly alter its shape. Basically, the brain is not a rigid thing in our skulls. It's constantly reconnecting, reorganizing knowledge, and LSD kind of stimulates that process. Also, LSD works against neuroinflammation, and neuroinflammation is the chief cause for dementia. So it looks like that these compounds that the government told us are too dangerous for us to use might actually be a brain food or very beneficial. And this is now being examined, and for sure psychedelic medicines will come onto the market, but it will take another 10, maybe even 20 years. But companies are working on this right now. This is a $1 billion market, obviously.
Sure. Yeah, we're talking with Norman Ohler. He's the author of a new book, Tripped, Nazi Germany, the CIA, and the Dawn of the Psychedelic Age. You have a chapter, LSD JFK. Tell me about that.
I mean, it's a fact that JFK had a girlfriend, and her name was Mary Pinchot. She was in the White House. She was seen by White House staff smoking weed with the president. There's documents for that. It's also a fact that she, in the spring of 1963, visited Timothy Leary, who had been a professor at Harvard and who was like the LSD guru. Basically, he thought everyone should take LSD, and then the world will become better. Okay, well. He gets visited by Pinchot, and Pinchot says to him, I have a very influential friend, and he wants to try LSD, and can you give us some? Because it's not so easy to get it, especially good material, I suppose, at the time. So Leary gave her LSD, But then there's no record that she actually took it with JFK in the White House. She had it in the White House with him, but you just pop it in your mouth and you've taken it. Like no one needs to see you, and no one would actually notice. Like security wouldn't notice if the president was high on LSD. So it's possible that he was on LSD. What is a fact again is that a few weeks after this encounter between Pinchot and Leary, when she received the LSD for her influential friend, Kennedy gave his so-called peace speech at the American University. And in this speech, which you can find easily on YouTube, for example, he speaks completely different than before. Before that, Kennedy was actually kind of hawkish. Like he was a Cold War guy. He was a traditional guy, and he thought, we have a problem with the Soviet Union. There's an arms race. There's a reason for it. We need to, be able to, make them be afraid of us, and the whole arms race thing. That he was completely going with it. And so it's also big industry, big American industry, big global industry. But this peace speech, which I encourage everyone to have a look at online, he suddenly speaks like a hippie. Like he says, we're all on this. We're all the same on this planet. We have the same interests. We have children. We want to take care of the children. And this is ridiculous that we actually compete with the East. We should work together. Like it's a funny speech. It's a good speech. You'd be amazed by his ideas. Actually, he had a complete turnaround of mind. And was that influenced by the LSD that he took in the White House? It's pure speculation. It's possible. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising. But maybe also, just the love affair with Pinchot, made him, changed him. It's also, or maybe just the weed he smoked with her. Yeah. But it is an interesting, and then if you think, and then obviously a few months later he gets shot in the head. That had these peaceful thoughts. So,
sadly. Norman, I got to wrap it up here. I'm sorry, we're out of time, but Tripped is the book. Norman Ohler, Ohler, is the author. Norman, thanks so much for dropping by.
It was a pleasure. Have a good...
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Thank you very much, Norman. Great talking with you. And thank you. We'll be right back with more of the news of the day and your calls right after this. And welcome back. Let's pick up some phone calls here. Rich in Indianapolis. Hey, Rich, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom, thank you. Speaking of tripping, I wanted to offer the observation about people having such a good time with the eclipse and how cool that is and how transformational as a perspective that experience for people has been compared to go back several hundred years when people were sure that it was the end of things.
They were terrified by
it.
And
as we listen to Marjorie Taylor Greene spout, spout, spout. Well, I was given some matchbook philosophy that I've really gotten a lot of value out of. And it's very simply, life is empty and meaningless, and it's empty and meaningless that life is empty and meaningless. And what matters is the choice we make in what we populate meaning with.
Exactly. How we fill life with meaning. Yeah.
There. Viktor Frankl's book is the book that my mother was always
Man's Search for Meaning?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And there was this one idea of him looking at a bowl of soup with a fish head in it, and there was all this beauty in the structure of the fish bones and the hue of the color that was of this piece of boiled fish. And to be able to recognize the power in perception undergirded by the choices we make is this wonderful power that if you really want to talk about divinity is this wonderful gift we've had dropped on us of choice, and how choosing can pretty much make us invincible as positive and capable and enduring, and the opposite is also true as people seek favor from power and embrace evil as a cost they feel they must bear in order to get ahead and destroy as they ascend. So we can experience this thing that shows us and we have to put the term clockwork of the universe to it, as the moon drifts in front of the sun and we experience something that is completely novel compared to a 24-hour day. The sun goes out. Oh my goodness. and be overwhelmed by the majesty and all these other superlative statements that will go along with that to express our awe.
Yeah, it had the potential to be a transcendent moment, absolutely.
Yeah.
Without LSD.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Precisely, without LSD.
Right.
Thank you. There's the punchline. Brother,
there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, good talking to you,
Bye-bye.
Rich. Excellent point. Thank you. It's 22 minutes past the hour. I'll be back with more of the news of the day at your calls in just a moment. Stay with us. Change starts with you. You can be calling your Democratic or Republican representatives to let them know what you think by calling 202-224-3121. It's the Capitol switchboard. It'll get you right through to them. One of the grand questions that political scientists have been scratching their heads over for years in America is, why do right-wing billionaires fund anti-black history movements? Why are they pouring money into these people? Why are they funding anti-trans movements? I mean, what does this have to do with being a billionaire? Well, it turns out it has a lot to do with it, and here's why. Almost 30 million Americans lack health insurance. 37 million of us live in dire poverty. 1 in 5 of us are illiterate. A quarter of Americans suffer from a diagnosable mental illness and can't get treatment. 316 people are shot every day in America. 44% of us carry student debt. And the billionaires don't want to pay income taxes to deal with any of these problems of society. That's the real issue. If they can get us fighting with each other over black history or over trans people or kids, they win. Then we're not talking about taxing them, raising their taxes to where they should be. There's a whole rant about this over at hartmanreport.com that you can read, and all the hot links. Check it out. Welcome back. So this is nuts. Wisconsin Republican Senate candidate Eric Hovde, this is the guy who is running against Senator Tammy Baldwin. This is the Republican who's going to be running against Tammy Baldwin. I believe. I believe he has passed his primary. I might be wrong on that. This article doesn't specify. It's from Raw Story, Matthew Chapman. But he is arguing that nursing home residents are too close to death to vote. They're too old to vote. He says, we had nursing homes where the sheriff of Racine investigated, where you had 100% voting in nursing homes. Well, if you're in a nursing home, you only have a 5-6 month life expectancy. Almost nobody in a nursing home is in a point to vote. Turns out, first off, that's a complete lie. There's not 100% voting in nursing homes. Never has been, never will be. The percentage of voting is not that different than the general population. Number one. Number two, some people live a lot more than 6 months. And number three, why don't you want them to vote? Oh, that's right. They're on Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, all programs brought to us by Democrats, all programs vigorously opposed by Republicans. By the way, the same guy who wants to be the next senator from Wisconsin, the next Republican senator from Wisconsin, says that in his ideal world, alcohol would not be legal for commercial sale. Right. Okay, now geeky science. The sense of touch is the first to develop in babies. We've got these special sensors, as it were, that they're called C-tactile afferents. The skin contains these specialized sensors, which are particularly receptive to gentle caressing touch and temperature, factors that are also thought to facilitate emotional regulation. What they found is that when people get more touch, get touched more, and this is, an argument to get a massage or an argument to just start touching your partner more and vice versa, they actually get physically and mentally better. It improves both physical and this was a study, it was published in the journal Nature Human Behavior, and it's a meta-study. The research looked at 212 previously published studies and included a statistical analysis of 85 studies involving adults and 52 involving newborns. The team found that touch was just as beneficial for mental health as for physical health, a finding that held for everybody from adults to newborns. And the type of touch and its duration was not that important, just the fact that somebody was touched. Oh, and touching the head is associated with greater health benefits than touching any other part of the body. Fascinating stuff. Get your massage. We'll pick up your calls on the other side of the break. It is 27 minutes past the hour. Stay with us.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
It's the True People's Media, the Thom Hartmann Program. I'll be back with your calls in just a moment. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is by P.E. Moskowitz. It's The Case Against Free Speech, the First Amendment, Fascism, and the Future of Dissent. This is from the introduction. This book is not anti-free speech. It is anti the concept of free speech. It's an important distinction. Everyone should have the right to say what they want. I will not argue otherwise. I am not an authoritarian. In this book, I will not argue that the United States should adopt laws banning racist speech, like the ones that have proliferated throughout Europe, for example. I think those laws are often counterproductive and end up being used against leftists instead of against racists. I won't argue that Nazi speech should be outlawed as it is in Germany. I won't argue that the First Amendment should be reformed nor more firmly upheld. This book is not about whether the First Amendment is good or bad. This book is about why the First Amendment is nearly irrelevant, except in its power as a propaganda tool. In the following chapters, I will argue that free speech as a concept is meaningless, that it is a dialectical smokescreen more than an ideal to be upheld, that in a grossly unequal society, in which a few corporations control the means of media dissemination and a small group of the ultra-wealthy bankroll entire political movements, there can be no meaningful definition of free speech. On paper, I'm free to speak as a billionaire. I am as free to speak as a billionaire. Yet I do not have the power to change laws through political donations, to influence college curricula, or to quash entire movements for economic liberation. And still, I hold more speech power than most. I am a published author, and my speech is sanctified by the gatekeepers of my publishing house. Therefore, the path to free speech, I will argue, has less to do with a law about speech, or many laws, than with ending racism and inequality. Throughout U.S. history, disparate groups have claimed to cherish free speech more than their enemies. Unionists in the 1920s saw free speech as synonymous with striking and ultimately class revolution. Today, conservatives are the group to most often shroud their politics in free speech, arguing that any silencing or protesting of their speech runs counter to U.S. values of freedom and liberty for all. But as I hope to prove in this book, free speech has never really existed, because freedom and liberty have never really existed for the vast majority of Americans. Instead, the U.S. has systematically acted against those values, suppressing the opportunities, speech, movements, and actions of the masses, especially people of color and anti-capitalists, in order to favor the free flow of capital to the owning class. This oppression and suppression have been constant since the founding of this country, and therefore free speech is a hollow signifier, pointing to a past that never existed. The funny thing about free speech is that it's been used to fight for and against these liberties, both as a guise for the wealthy and powerful to oppress the poor, like the Koch brothers and their supporters using free speech to push through anti-democratic legislation and rip apart campaign finance laws, and as a rhetorical tool for the working class to further their cause, as happened in the early 1900s when leftists argued that free speech includes the freedom to riot, and the ACLU argued it was the only way to prevent a violent revolution. I don't argue that one definition of free speech is more legitimate than the other, but that they are all relatively empty signifiers, hiding more tangible structures of power and ideas underneath them. So why write a book on free speech if I think the term is essentially meaningless? Because the concept holds so much weight in our country. We argue endlessly about whether it's being trampled on, whether college students hate it, whether the government is adequately upholding it, but we rarely ask what free speech is, or how we got to the free speech crisis we supposedly face today. When you scratch the surface of conversations over free speech, you find more difficult issues underneath. It's much easier to talk about the ability of conservatives to speak on college campuses than about the systemic racism, sexism, and transphobia college students experience. And those are the things that students who protest campus visits by right-wing conservatives are actually fighting against. It's easier to fantasize about a country that values free speech than to grapple with the fact that we place so much emphasis on free speech while jailing dissidents and allowing tens of millions to live in poverty. What is free speech to someone who works 60 hours a week and has no time nor any platform to use their supposed right? There is relatively little literature and philosophy on free speech, despite the fact that it has been in constant contention since the founding of this country. Even the legal history of the First Amendment is sparse for something so foundational to the values of our country. A few have seriously grappled with ideas of what free speech does and does not mean, most notably literary theorist Stanley Fish, who has argued that the term does not mean much at all. Leftists like Noam Chomsky have written about free speech tangentially in their explorations of media as a propaganda tool. Most history books on speech are written as hagiographies, unquestioning the intent of the Founding Fathers and their morals, with a few notable exceptions, such as Laura Weintraub's The Taming of Free Speech. I don't intend to fill the yawning gap of research history and philosophy. This is not a definitive account of free speech, but a necessary intervention, prodding us to be more critical of the term, and maybe along with it, of the other lofty concepts we must hold near and dear. The case against free speech.
From international trade policy to immigration policy to housing, we've got all kinds of topics. The wars between Republicans and Democrats, the Republican efforts to induce fascism in the United States. A great selection of opinions will be found in report.com. So when was the last time you heard some Republican ranting about how, you know, like Ron DeSantis, Florida's where woke goes to die, and we're declaring war on woke, and all that kind of. You know, Republicans have been using dog whistles for most of my lifetime to shout out to their generally white racist base against various minority groups. Richard Nixon was, we're law and order. And, as John Ehrlichman pointed out, his whole war on drugs was basically a war on black people and hippies. George Herbert Walker Bush had Willie Horton. George W. Bush had the Muslims. Donald Trump, it's the Mexican rapists. It just never ends. Woke is just the latest dog whistle they've got. So the next time somebody uses that phrase, just, ask them, what are you talking about here? Are you just trying to tell me that you're a bigot? I mean, what are you really saying? There's a whole rant about this over at HartmannReport.com. Check it out. 35 minutes past the hour, picking up your calls here. Jim in Canadian Lakes, Michigan. Hey, Jim, what's up?
Hi, Tom. So much to say, so little time.
Indeed.
So I was responding to Team Greed, Tom, and he was talking about being in the middle class, and I was thinking, does he have a concept of what GDP is per household? And in America, it's over $185,000. So we say he's middle class, but he's just part of the class that's getting his life stolen from him, even more so the bottom 20%.
Yeah, absolutely. And that proves the old joke that, you know, 5 average middle-class guys are sitting at a bar and Bill Gates walks in and suddenly the average of all of them is worth billions of dollars, each one of them, you know, on average. And it just, you know, were it not for all those billionaires, you wouldn't have that $100,000 number you just threw out, Jim.
Yeah, it's sort of ridiculous. I like to follow Ford stock, and those laborers, the people who went on strike, of course they cost me a few bucks, but I was on their team. And those guys are so productive. You know, they produce over $5 million each in vehicles.
Wow.
Well, that's 100 cars per employee.
So the employee produces $5 million worth of product, and in exchange for that, they're paid, what, $25, $30, $40 an hour?
Yeah, and that's so hard for the corporatists to bite. It's just unbelievable how we sell ourselves short to these rip-off clowns. It's really sickening. And it relates to Social Security. The Social Security problem is an issue basically because we replace people with machines, and poof, there goes 10% of what we could have had as receipts. But that money's gone somehow. We can't. First of all, you know, it replaced the labor. Press labor costs down. It's just untenable how there's no answers when there's actually plentiful amount of answers. Just nobody can even think about adding more cost to their product.
Yeah, I get it. Jim, excellent points. Thank you so much for calling and making them. Bill in Clifton, New Jersey. Hey, Bill, what's on your mind today?
I understand that yesterday Trump was following the path of totalitarianism, you know, instead of totality. Anyway.
Oh, I see. Okay. I'm sorry. I missed the joke. It's quite all right.
Okay. All right. I was wondering what happens if Trump wins the election in November and in December he's convicted of crimes, federal and state. He can't assume office, I would think, or take the oath.
Nobody knows. I mean, we're in uncharted territory here. We've never had a criminal as a president before, and therefore we've never had a president being held to account under criminal law. So nobody knows how this is going to play out.
I think they disproved the idea of that he can pardon himself.
Well, that would have to be decided by the Supreme Court. Nobody knows if that's possible or not.
I don't know. I thought it was based on something where you can't try yourself or whatever it is.
There is a legal principle like that, but this is not a court. This is an executive action.
Right. And then one last thing. I hope at some point you get to look up the Washington Post's mission statement, which was written by Eugene Meyer, who is a right-wing conservative. He was the first president of the World Bank. He was chairman of the Fed under Roosevelt. He wasn't too happy about the New Deal, but he put out the statement when he bought the Washington. By the way, he lived in Seven Springs, and that's the Trump house up in Westchester. He built that.
Oh, wow.
And his daughter married someone named Graham, so her name was Catherine Graham, and the paper was left to her.
Right.
But in his 7 principles, he talks about the first mission of the newspaper is to tell the truth as nearly as the truth can be ascertained. The newspaper shall tell all the truth so far as it can learn it concerning important affairs of America. The newspaper's duty is to its readers and the public at large, not to private interests of its owners. the pursuit of truth newspaper shall be prepared to make sacrifices of material fortunes if such course be necessary for the public good.
Yeah.
And
that's great. I mean, very noble perspective on that, Bill. I'll have to look it up. Thank you for sharing that with me. I had no idea. Good talking to you. Chad in Chicago. Hey, Chad, what's on your mind today?
Good to talk to you, Tom. I'm a college graduate and now living on a pension and had to go out and find a second job because my health insurance just went up almost $100 a month. And at the time, my parents couldn't afford to pay for my college, but I did decide to make the conscious choice to go to college and enroll. I worked 2 jobs during college and incurred a huge amount of credit card debt. And I'm wondering who I could get a hold of.
Chad.
I want to know who's gonna reimburse me for all the debt that I incurred to make a choice to go to college. And why is it that nobody, especially on the left, isn't putting any pressure on these institutions, these colleges, to reduce the cost of these tuitions because they're astronomical, and it's a ripoff.
We are the only developed democracy in the world that does not offer widespread free college education. In fact, you know, there's 7 countries in Europe that will pay you to go to college, anywhere from $300 a month to $1,000 a month. There's American students who are studying right now in Germany and in Czechoslovakia and in a half a dozen different European countries where they're actually paid by those governments to go to college.
That's great. We're not in Czechoslovakia.
No, I get that, but here's the thing: if you know, it was free college in the United States. Abraham Lincoln was the first guy who gave us free college with the Morrill Act. The Morrill Act designated, I think it was 74. I could be wrong. Created 74 universities. Michigan State University was one of them, and they're called land-grant colleges because Lincoln gave this land and said, use the land to make money so that you can run the college so that people can go to college for free. Before that, Thomas Jefferson created the University of Virginia. Again, a free college for the first 100 years or so of its existence. And when my parents were going to college, it was really free. I mean, it was really cheap. My mom worked her way through Michigan State University, propping airplanes, and as a lifeguard up in Charlevoix, it's crappy pay. My dad got the GI Bill. He was paid to go to college. So, you know, that was that generation, and that generation having that college education is what brought us a man on the moon. It's what brought us the transistor. It's what brought us the integrated circuit. It's what made America the most competitive nation in the world, education. And then Reagan came along and said, I don't want to pay for these brats. That was the word he used to describe college students. I don't want to pay for these brats. And he ended free college in California when he was governor. And then the first thing he did in the first year he was president was to cut the federal education budget by 20%. It used to be in 1980, before Reagan came into office, 80% of a college education cost was paid for by the school, by the state, or by the federal government. And 20% was paid as tuition. Today, tuition covers 80%. And the government only picks up 20%. This is the damage that Ronald Reagan has done to America. And as a result, there's an enormous amount of lost potential, an enormous number of people who could be extraordinarily productive and help our society who just can't because they can't get the education because they can't afford it.
Okay, great points, Tom. You still haven't answered any of my questions. Who's going to cut me a check and reimburse me? And why aren't anybody on the left, including the Democrats, and you yourself on your show, you got a huge platform, why aren't you putting the screws to these colleges to lower tuition costs? Pretty simple question.
Well, colleges, by and large, are nonprofit institutions. And so when you're looking at what they're charging, you're typically looking at what it actually costs them to provide an education. Costs have gone up. I mean, we've had inflation since 1980 as well. So I don't think leaning on the colleges is the solution. I think the solution is to go back to what we had before Reagan.
And Tom, I think the reason why the college tuitions have gone through the roof is because they've offered all these grants and programs out there. And all the colleges, and they realize that they're going to lean on the government. There are no more grants and programs
from the colleges themselves now than there were 50 years ago. Chad, it's just wrong. Chad, thanks for the call. 45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archive.
Defending America from the weapons of mass deception. I'll be back with your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Carol in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Hey, Carol, what's up?
Hey, hello, Tom. Good to talk to you again. Hey, for breakfast this morning, I emailed CNN and told them to stop being partisan. I called Mike Johnson and told him to pass a clean Ukraine bill if he didn't want to go down as the worst speaker ever, and wrote a several page letter to President Biden and his team telling him that we're pulling for him. That's breakfast. But what I wanted to call you is that I didn't know if you were aware, but it's on Raw Story, The Guardian, Euro News, all over, that 3 months, you knew about this part, I think, 3 months ago, Orban met with the Republicans in a private meeting, right? You knew
Viktor
about
Orban, the dictator of Hungary, yeah.
Yeah, sure. And then a week ago, he met with the oath-breaking insurrectionists at Mar-a-Lago, and when he returned to Hungary, he was greeted in the street by hundreds of thousands Hungarians because they're protesting him and his corrupt cabinet.
Yep.
So things are looking up.
Yeah, I agree. You know, people will only put up with corruption like Viktor Orban's and Vladimir Putin's for so long before the government has to basically crush them, which is what Putin is doing. It'll be interesting to see if Orban decides to go more authoritarian or if he decides to back away a little bit and allow a little more democracy in Hungary. But I wouldn't place bets on that. But Carol, thank you.
Well, you know what?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say one more thing. I think he was pretty much embarrassed at NATO when it was the last holdout.
Although,
I think he's good.
You know, after he met with Trump, he came out and told the press that Trump, if he gets elected, is going to cut off all U.S. aid to Ukraine. That's his way to solve the problem. Just hand them over to Russia.
I don't think that's going to work, but we'll keep pulling.
Yeah, there you go.
Have a good day.
Thank you,
Tom.
Carol. Good talking to you. Katie in Hudson, Massachusetts. Hey, Katie, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Well, you know, I was very disappointed to hear about Arizona, and, you know, now I have to add them to my do not travel to states, you know, because I don't want $1 of my money going into their economy when they're allowing things like the basically total ban on abortion.
Yeah.
And, you know, also, whenever I encounter a Trump supporter, I just say, you're supporting him, huh? Well, you know that he's no less than a convicted rapist, a convicted thief, and an indicted traitor. And he has nothing but contempt for you, your family, your country, and our democracy.
That's well said. Nice and tight, too, Katie. What kind of response do you get when you say that to Trump followers?
Absolutely. Because, you know, it's like, yeah, go ahead, vote for him, but don't delude yourself.
No, what kind of response do you get when you say that?
Huh?
What kind of response do you get when you say that?
Usually they just turn away.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just kind of like they just don't, there is no response.
Yeah, nobody's punched you or anything,
but I mean, huh?
Nobody has taken a swing at you.
No, not yet.
Not yet. That's great, Katie. I think you summarized it quite accurately and quite well. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Katie, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that, you know, it's like you can support him, but you need to not delude yourself as to what you're supporting.
Exactly. Katie, thank you. It's 10 minutes before the hour. I'll be back with you in just a few moments. Stay with us. Help support progressive radio. If you're listening to us on a commercial station, call their advertisers and let them know you're listening. If you're listening to us on nonprofit stations, please support them when they do their fundraising drives. Thanks for supporting Progressive Talk Radio and tag you're it.
10 minutes before the hour. Welcome back. Picking up your calls. Here's Susha in Venice. Hey, what's up?
Hey, Tom. By the way, I have donated to Tammy Baldwin, and I sure hope she wins. I want to suggest to the woman who said she doesn't want any money to go to Arizona that maybe she could consider at least donating to a Democratic candidate there.
Amen.
And also, have you posted or can you give us a list of all the Democrat candidates that are in especially need of our support across the various states?
The place to find that is over at Daily Kos. They do a really, really good job of organizing that kind of information and making it available to people.
Okay, and how do you go there?
It's dailykos.com.
Okay, KOS.com. Okay, excellent.
Indivisible.org also has that information and does a great job with it. And they're worth joining.
Indivisible.org.
Correct.
Okay. Also, I want you to know that and I'm sure I'm speaking for hundreds of thousands of people, that you are a national treasure who gives so much
thank you, Susha.
Of, tremendously ineffable support to our sanity and the truth. And, you are just beyond priceless and well-beloved.
Well, thank you.
Regarding touch, in addition to my experience as a body worker, it's documented that babies or when an infant is crying, to pick it up and carry it for 5 minutes, that will soothe them deeply instead of cooing to them in their strollers and sticking a pacifier in their mouth.
Yeah.
That what these babies want more than anything is to be held and to be touched.
Yep.
And the inestimably damaging modern trend of keeping infants and babies from our loving arms is likely what has spawned the recent generations of grown people who have lost their empathy and connection to their fellow humans. Mm. These strollers, people just keeping them in strollers. I don't know if you've seen it because I haven't heard you mention it in your recent remarks about the Russians, but in the last week, 60 Minutes aired a program about quote-unquote Havana syndrome, the original and more widely known name for something which has now been renamed more accurately since it has to do more than just with Cuba. But the investigators have uncovered direct evidence about a non-lethal acoustic device that the Russians have developed that they have been using to target the individual operatives and their families that have been involved in the investigation of insidious Russians. And one woman, I believe the wife of an agent, who was in her laundry room near a window, suddenly felt a blinding pain in her ears. She looked out the window, saw an unfamiliar car, went outside.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with the story, Susha.
She later identified.
What's your point about it?
Okay, so I just don't know that people are aware of how Putin is directly targeting the people investigating his corruption.
He's directly targeting Americans. Susha, thank you very much. Thanks for all your comments. Appreciate it. Jeff in Newburgh, Indiana. Hey, Jeff, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for you and your show. Truly appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
I heard a phrase or a term yesterday, sunk cost fallacy. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I had never heard it before.
I know what a sunk cost is, but I don't know why it would be a fallacy.
I don't know. That's the term I heard, and when I looked it up, that was part of it. But basically, to me, it explained a lot about diehard Trump followers and, in fact, banks that lost money but continued to loan him money because the belief, I guess the term is, you have so much invested in time, belief, whatever, that although you realize changing course would be more beneficial, you just have too much invested.
Right. The cliche or the old phrase is throwing good money after bad.
There you go.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'd never heard it before, but to me it explained a lot about forever Trump followers and no matter what he does, they go along with it.
Yeah, and this billionaire out in California who's trying to bail him out, with his bond. Amazing. Jeff, thank you for that. Thank you very much, and thanks for listening to Sirius XM. Ed in Chicago. Hey, Ed, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Over 26,000 women in Texas right now are pregnant due to rape.
I know.
That's not what I'm calling about, but that can't be said
56,000 nationwide.
Right. But the reason I'm calling, I'm wondering, do you think that the Democratic Party will ever talk about getting rid of the Ronald Reagan tax, Social Security tax?
We had a caller on that earlier. You know, the Heritage Foundation, I believe, it was one of the right-wing think tanks, I think it was Heritage, last year came out with a suggestion that Republicans should run on that.
I remember that.
Yeah. I think Democrats should run on it.
Well, yeah, Mike, I know you've talked about this in the past, but I'm trying to figure out why this seems to me like a no-brainer for any politician from any party to be running on this. I would love to see this as part of the Democratic platform, but yet there's quiet as mice about this. And
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
I'm trying to figure out why Reagan started taxing Social Security income to begin with. You know, I mean, there was not much national debt at the time that he did that. It wasn't that the federal government needed more money. Our national debt was only $800 billion when Ronald Reagan came into office. I mean, it wasn't even $1 trillion. So, but yeah, I'm with you. Ed, I got to run. I'm sorry, but thank you for the call. And thanks for being with us today. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, don't forget, democracy is not a spectator sport. It requires all of us, and that includes you. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a great afternoon. Be good to yourself and the people around you.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.
In addition to bringing you the Thom Hartmann Program here on Free Speech TV and Video Media Online, we also have a whole set of ways you can interact with us and tools you can use to spread the word about the importance of democracy and the threats to it in our republic. First, there's your daily homework. Sue Nethercutt puts together a daily email newsletter that has a link to every story I discuss on the air, so you can find my sources and you can share them with your friends. It's free and you can sign up at thomhartmann.com. Second, I publish my daily take every day over at the hartmannreport.com website. That's also free if you want the daily 5 days a week rant in your inbox. No ads either. Third, we have the podcasts. There's the free 1-hour version of our daily show that's advertising supported. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts normally. And then there's also the podcast of the entire 3-hour show with no advertisements, and that's available by subscription over at thomhartmann.com. So check them all out at thomhartmann.com and hartmannreport.com.